Live stream is started. Sergeant, can you start your recordings? Computer recording on.
Cloud recording is rolling.
Good morning and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Zoning and Franchises. At this time, would council staff please turn on their video. Please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. That is landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you. Chair, we're ready to begin.
Good morning and welcome to a meeting of the Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchises. I'm Councilmember Kevin Riley, Chair of the Subcommittee. This morning, I'm joined remotely by Chair Lewis, Councilmember Abreu, and Councilmember Shulman. And we also joined by Councilmember Moyer. Today, we'll be holding a public hearing on 3 rezoning proposals: 1034-1042 Atlantic Avenue, 870-888 Atlantic Avenue, and 1377 Sutter Avenue. Before we begin, I recognize the subcommittee counsel to review the hearing procedures.
Thank you, Chair Riley. I am Angelina Martinez, review counsel to the subcommittee. Members of the public wishing to testify were asked to register for today's hearing. If you wish to testify and have not already registered, please do so by visiting the New York City Council website at www.council.nyc.gov/land-use to sign up. Members of the public may also view a live stream broadcast of this meeting at the council's website. As a technical note for the benefit of the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of any of the presentations shown today, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. When called to testify, individuals appearing before the subcommittee will remain muted until recognized by the chair to speak. Applicant teams will be recognized as a group and called first, followed by members of the public. And when the chair recognizes you, your microphone will be unmuted. Please take a moment to check your device and confirm that your mic is on before you begin speaking. Public testimony will be limited to 2 minutes per witness. If you have additional testimony you would like the subcommittee to consider, or if you have written testimony you would like to submit instead of appearing here before the subcommittee, you may email it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Please indicate the LU number and/or project name in the subject line of your email. During the hearing, council members with questions should use the Zoom raise hand function, which appears at the bottom of either your participant panel or the primary viewing window. Council members with questions will be announced in order as they raise their hands, and Chair Riley will then recognize members to speak. Witnesses are requested to remain in the meeting until excused by the chair, as council members may have questions. Finally, there will be pauses over the course of this meeting for various technical reasons, and we ask that you please be patient as we work through any issues. Chair Riley will now continue with today's agenda items.
Thank you, Council. To continue with today's meeting, I will now open the public hearing on pre-considered LUs related to ULURP number C210031, ZMK, and N210032, ZRK, relating to the Sutter Avenue rezoning proposal in Councilmember Barron's district in Brooklyn. This application seeks a zoning map amendment to rezone an existing R5 district to an R6A/C2-4 district, and a related zoning text amendment to establish an MIH program area to facilitate the development of a new 5-story mixed-use building. For anyone wishing to testify on this item, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council website at council.nyc.gov/land-use. Once again, council.nyc.gov/land-use. And we have just been joined by Councilmember Botcher. Council, please call the first panel for this item.
The first panel for this item is Lisa Orantia, Franklin Almonte, and Steve Sinacori.
Council, please.
Pardon me, Mr. Chairman, I make a comment on my project? I just got on.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Barron. I didn't see you was on. We had just been joined by Councilmember Barron. Council, I'm going to allow Councilmember Barron to give some brief remarks. Councilmember Barron.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Sorry for my lateness, but I was in several other meetings. We're not supporting this project. It's 28 units of housing and 17 to 20 of them are at 60% of the AMI. And our communities need to understand when you talk about the AMI, the area median income of New York for a family of 3 is $107,000, $400,000, and the 60% of that is $64,000. So 17 to 20 of units are at that. And even if you go down to 50% of the AMI, that's 53,000. My neighborhood AMI is ranged from 32,000 to 36,000. This is not affordable, and many of the projects will not be affordable in perpetuity, the apartments. So we was negotiating back with the developers. We have agreed that this project is not the project for my community, and they'll be submitting another idea around this same property in a week or two, and we'll be discussing that. But as this project stands, we are not in support of it in my community.
Mr. Riley, may I ask a question?
Sure, Councilmember Brady.
Councilman Barron, which LU number is that?
It's the one on Sutter, the Sutter Avenue project.
Okay.
Councilmember Brady, it is
The first is Sutter Avenue, Councilmember Abreu.
Sutter Avenue one that we just mentioned. Let me get you the LU. The LUs related to the ULIP numbers are C210031 ZMK and N210032 ZRK.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Barron.
Thank you.
Council, for the record, can you please just call the first panel for this item again?
Sure. The panel for this item is Lisa Orantia, Steve Sinacori, and Franklin Almonte.
Council, can you please administer the affirmation?
Yes, applicants, I will call on you individually to respond, but can you raise your right hands? Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the subcommittee and in your answers to all council member questions? Lisa Orantia?
Yes.
Steve Sinacori?
Yes.
Franklin Almonte? Franklin Almonte is the applicant for Sutter?
He may not be on yet. You may have to start without him. I apologize.
Okay, so if he joins, then we'll take the oath then. So we have Steve Sinacori and this Lisa Orantia sworn in for this hearing.
Thank you, Councilor. We've just been joined by Chair Moya. Thank you for the benefit of the viewing public. If you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now that the applicant team may begin, panelists, as you begin, I'll just ask you to please reinstate your name and organization for the record. You may begin.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Orantia, Land Use Counsel from Ackerman LLP. Thank you for your time today. Can you please bring up the presentation? This is an application for a zoning and text amendment that will allow the construction of a 5-story mixed-use building in East New York. The owner is Almonte Lincoln, LLC. Franklin Almonte is a first-generation Dominican and local merchant who was born and raised in East New York. Mr. Almonte, I hope will be joining soon, but my colleague Steve Sinacori are available to answer questions. Next slide, please. The project area is located along the north side of Sutter Avenue between Autumn and Lincoln Avenues. Next slide, please. Existing construction dates from 1977 and contains commercial uses that are not allowed as of right in their current residential district. Next slide. The proposal seeks to change the R5 district to an R6A with a C24 overlay. This change would create new income restricted housing and would replace outmoded buildings with new construction for as of right commercial uses. The proposed text amendment would designate the area for mandatory inclusionary housing under options 1 and 2. Next slide, please. The proposed 5-story mixed-use building will contain 28 units and about 7,400 square feet of retail space. Next slide, please. All 28 apartments will be reserved for rent-burdened families earning a range of household incomes. After discussions with the community, the owner has proposed to use option 1 instead of option 2, and to lower the top and bottom tiers to include units at 30% AMI and no units higher than 70% AMI. And we look forward to continuing to work with the community. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Then I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Barron to ask some questions. The first question I have you discussed this proposal with HPD in regards to developing 100% affordable housing under an HPD term sheet?
Yes, we're proposing to seek a subsidy under the HPD Neighborhood Construction Program.
Okay, and proposed development site is currently home to 4 small businesses. Has there been any discussion of the development with the tenants or plans to assist them to relocate?
Yes, so all of the tenants are aware of the proposed rezoning. There's a beauty salon, a restaurant, a dry cleaner, and an auto repair. The retail use tenants have been invited to come back to the new building when it's complete, and they've all expressed an interest in doing so.
Thank you, Lisa. And my last question before I turn on to Councilmember Barron, he brought up some concerns about the AMI, how the community is concerned about that. Are you guys prepared to negotiate, or have you been negotiating with the council member and the community board to kind of figure out how you could kind of suit the community's needs?
Yes, absolutely. Right now we have 2 proposals that have been offered that each one we believe is financeable. And we are prepared to seek the necessary subsidy from HPD for those. Like I said, all the apartments are going to be income restricted, and the current proposal we have offered is all the units below 70% AMI.
Thank you, Lisa. We've just been joined by Councilmember Carr. I'm going to yield my time to Councilmember Barron. Councilmember Barron, would you like to ask your questions?
Yes, thank you very much. But we have told these developers over and over again. If you notice, they said 17 of the units are at 60% of the AMI. And in order to get to 3 units for the homeless or 3 units at a lower 30% AMI, they want as high as 70% of the AMI. The community board doesn't want it. That's too high. That's a form of gentrification for us, and we're not going to allow that in our community. I want to encourage this board not to support this project. We told the developers that is not affordable. This is how our communities get gentrified, even though this is a small, low number of housing, 28 units. This AMI is not the AMI for our neighborhood. And when I asked them, do you know that neighborhood AMI? First, some did, some didn't. Then they said, oh, it's $36,000 for a family of 3. So if you have 20 of your units are at 70 to 60% of the AMI, that is not affordable for us. And the fact that they're not in perpetuity, the affordability is another issue. So I propose to them that 20 of the units be at 30% to 40% of the AMI. That's in our range. That's at 32,000 and 42,000. So if we had 10 at 30% and 10 at 40%, we could work with the other 8 being at 60%, because some people in our neighborhood do make 50, 60, 70,000. But they said that's not doable. So this project is not doable for us. And we're expecting a different kind of proposal to come forward. And I'm encouraging, when you get to voting, that we vote this project down.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. I now invite my colleagues to ask questions. If you have questions for the applicant panel, please use the raise hand button on the participant panel. I see that Councilmember Abreu has his hand raised. Councilmember Abreu, you may ask your question.
Time starts.
Yeah, I'll make the comment that I share Councilmember Barron's concerns about the affordability tiers. But aside from that, I did have a question regarding the tenant that you're saying the developer is going to allow to stay. Has there been any talks about what the price of rent will be for the small business tenants?
No, all three of the retail tenants have been welcomed back. So they'll have a first opportunity to rent the new space. The rental amounts have not been discussed yet because we're still far off from having the space move in ready. But the applicant, as I said, he's a local merchant. He's been operating the Fine Fare supermarket across the street from the project area since 1993. So as a local merchant, he's well aware of the need for affordable commercial space and for putting viable businesses in that space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Abreu.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just one last thing.
Sure. Sergeant, can you stop the timer and give Councilmember Barron the option to ask a
I'm
question?
sorry. But just on the commercial part, in all of our projects, be aware of commercial rents, because commercial rents are going through the roof. And when they can't get you with the residential rents, they go commercial. And while they're promising them to come back, I know one part of the unit, the commercial business that they're not promising to come back, and that's the auto repair shop. So that one is not, and we were going to set up a meeting, even if they come with another project, is bringing those businesses with the developers at a meeting with us so we can hear the exchange and not just say you're welcome back without any defined affordable commercial rent. So very good question, my colleague, because we're going to be looking at that very closely as well.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. Chair Salamanca.
Time starts.
Yes, how are you? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Chair.
Excuse the noise in the background. I have one quick question because I've heard this project before with the previous council member. Was there an agreement or with the previous council member on this particular project? And if so, what did she agree to?
On this particular project, we had agreed to some affordable unit and even gave a letter for that. But as the AMI rises, what may have been affordable then is no longer affordable now. So if the AMI back then, the 100% of the AMI was 86,000 and 60% of that, would be more at 50, 60 in our range. So as the AMI changed, so did our position on this change. And so did some of their numbers change. So we are responding to those changes. And this makes this not affordable for our community. And she's with me on this. She's right in the other room. Would you like me to get her to prove that? No. She's very supportive of us with this, because this is just not affordable for us. And we're on the same page with everything. And we usually go over these things together. And when we saw these changes, we had a change in our position because this project is just not affordable as it stands.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. Lisa?
Yeah, just to respond to that question, there was an agreement and a letter of support in 2019 that there was an understanding that the project would be 100% affordable with at least 80% of the units at or below 60% AMI, and the remainder would be at 80%. And we proceeded with the application, that understanding.
Thank you. Just for the record, we've been joined by Councilmember Hudson. Are there any more council members with questions for this panel? There being no further questions, the applicant panel is excused. Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on the Sutter Avenue proposal?
I don't believe there's any members of the public at this time to testify on this proposal. Confirming that no members of the public.
Thank you. There being no questions for this panel, this witness, oh, excuse me, sorry, y'all. There being no other members of the public who wish to testify on the pre-considered LUs related to ULIPS numbers C210031 ZMK and N210032 ZRK relating to the Sutter Avenue rezoning proposal, the public hearing is now closed and the items are laid over. I will now open the public hearing on LUs, 20, 21, and 22 relating to the 1034-1042 Atlantic Avenue proposal in Councilmember Hudson's district in Brooklyn. This application seeks a zoning map amendment to rezone an existing M1-1 district to a C6-3A and R7A/C2-4 district, a related zoning text amendment to establish an MIH program area and a special permit to reduce residential off-street parking. For anyone wishing to testify on this item, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/land use. I would like to allow Councilmember Hudson to give any remarks regarding this project. Councilmember Hudson.
Thank you. I just had to close my door. Thank you, Chair Riley. Okay. Thank you, Chair Riley and members of the Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchises for the opportunity to speak regarding the proposed developments at 870-888 Atlantic Avenue and 1034-1042 Atlantic Avenue, both of which are located in the 35th Council District. Today, I want to voice my deep concern over these two projects and reiterate my support for a community-led comprehensive neighborhood plan for Atlantic Avenue. In 2018, former council member Lori Cumbo, then Borough President Eric Adams, and the leadership of Brooklyn Community Board 8 endorsed a framework for the area developed by the Department of City Planning known as MCROWN, which stands for Manufacturing, Commercial, Residential Opportunity for a Working Neighborhood. The MCROWN framework is one of the only citywide examples in recent years of a community proactively planning for greater density. Community Board 8 put forth a framework calling on the city to rezone the current M11 district along Atlantic Avenue and surrounding blocks to increase available density for residential development with additional commercial and manufacturing uses. The plan also aimed to set affordability levels based on the median income for the local community district and to use market rate development to cross-subsidize deeply affordable housing. In response, the Department of City Planning worked with CB8 to develop a planning framework for the area. While there continue to be some disagreements between DCP and the Community Board on the details of zoning incentives for arts, light industrial, and community facility spaces to achieve a dynamic mixed-use community, community groups and borough leadership still threw their support behind this plan, and we're on the verge of seeing it to the finish line before the COVID-19 pandemic and DCP's prioritization of other rezonings place it on the back burner. Yet my constituents and I still want to pursue the goal of diverse and equitable economic development within a truly mixed-use neighborhood. To move forward, we need to see an integrated plan to address these goals. While the city has failed to act, private developers repeatedly bring forward piecemeal proposals for large projects without regard for their cumulative impact on the community and neighborhood infrastructure, like public transit, sewer capacity, pedestrian safety, vehicle traffic, carbon emissions, or school capacity. This has forced the community to either say no or scramble to try to address larger policy issues on individual sites when what is actually needed is neighborhood-wide planning. Meanwhile, the 35th district has seen a 20% decline in our Black population over the past decade, showing the dire need for targeted neighborhood-wide initiatives to preserve existing affordable apartments and protect longtime homeowners from predatory speculation, as well as produce new, deeply affordable housing that is within reach of more of my constituents. From 2019 to 2021, 5 private applications in the MCROWN area were approved by the prior council members that will bring nearly 1,000 projected new apartments. These 2 applications before us today could bring over 700 more. And these figures don't even count the over 6,000 new housing units built in the surrounding half-mile radius between 2010 and 2020. As such, our current system of approving individual applications with little to no consideration for surrounding neighborhoods, including how various upgrades would be funded to meet additional growth, is untenable. Simply put, we can no longer keep doing things the way we have for decades. And I'm concerned that without any neighborhood planning or city investments, these applications simply represent a continuation of the untenable status quo. As a new class of council members, it is our responsibility to be bold and commit to the reforms we talked about on the campaign trail. We talked about change, now we have to enact that change. I'm calling for a broad community-led comprehensive approach that expands upon the neighborhood-wide M-Crown framework that will yield much-needed city investments in new affordable housing, preservation of existing affordable housing, protection for longtime homeowners from predatory speculation, street safety, open space, schools, public transit, and economic development. I'll be working with the City Council, Borough President Reynoso, local community boards, and community organizations to develop a method of soliciting input from the entire community, not just individuals who attend community board meetings, to determine what they want to see in their neighborhoods. This will include canvassing and outreach to folks on the verge of being displaced or who have already been displaced in Community District 8. Through this process, we will have a greater understanding of the needs and wants of our wider community that our city can incorporate into a larger neighborhood rezoning. I hope you will support the community's efforts over the next few months to create and implement a rezoning along Atlantic Avenue that incorporates the M-Crown framework and includes an integrated plan for the wider area to pursue more deeply affordable housing, diverse economic development, and a reimagined Atlantic Avenue and public realm in this long neglected part of Brooklyn. I look forward to hearing from my constituents and the public about their views on these two proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hudson. Council, can you please call the first panel for this item?
Yes, the panel for this item is Richard LaBelle, Fayam Batan, Nicola Berries, Kevin Williams, and Ellie Pariente.
Council, can you please administer the affirmation?
Applicants, I will call on you individually to respond. Can you all raise your right hand? Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the subcommittee and in your answers to all council member questions? Richard LaBelle?
I do.
Fayam Batan?
I do.
Ellie Pariente?
I do.
Kevin Williams?
Do.
And Nicola Berries?
I do.
Thank you. For the benefit of the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that's landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant team may begin. Panelists, as you begin, I'll just ask you to please reinstate your name and organization for the record. You may begin.
Good morning, Chair Riley, Councilmember Hudson, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Ellie Pariente, Principal of EMP Capital Group and applicant for 1034, 1042 Atlantic Avenue. This project is a result of significant engagement with the different community stakeholders over the past few years, starting back to a previous project located at 979 Pacific, in which we were the first applicant in the area to enter into a community benefits agreement, implementing the prior commitments that were made on the site. Similarly, the application before you today seeks to address many of the priorities I have heard from community members, such as affordable housing, including mainly deeply affordable units, job creation, ground floor space that can be utilized for either a youth center or senior center, and streetscape improvements that will make Atlantic Avenue safer and more welcoming for pedestrians. I look forward to addressing your questions, and with that, I will turn it over to Richard LaBelle to present the details of the application.
Thank you, Chair Riley, Councilmember Hudson, members of the Zoning and Franchise Subcommittee. Good morning. My name is Richard LaBelle of Sheldon LaBelle for the applicant. If you can load the presentation, please. So the application today is for 1034 to 1042 Atlantic Avenue. Next slide. This is a summary of the actions that are sought pursuant to the rezoning. The lot area included in the project site is roughly 20,000 square feet. and is inclusive of a rezoning along Atlantic Avenue to a C63A zoning district, which is roughly the equivalent of an R9A residential district at a floor area ratio of 8.5, as well as an R7A C24 zoning district along Pacific Street with the residential equivalent of a 4.6. In addition to these rezonings from M11 to mixed-use residential, the application includes a text amendment to mandatory inclusionary housing, which would require that any of these sites which are redeveloped with residential include required affordability. As written, we have included options 1 and 2 during the course of our discussions with the community and other stakeholders. We now are including option 1 and 3. In addition to this, there is a text amendment which would allow for modification of zoning resolution 3566 to permit wide 20-foot wide sidewalks along Atlantic Avenue, as well as a special permit to reduce parking in accordance with statements by recent council members and the Brooklyn Borough President. The entirety of these actions would facilitate the development of 1034 to 1042 Atlantic, these two lots with a roughly 172,000 square foot building with mixed use commercial, community facility, and residential development on 2 separate frontages. The proposed development would have roughly 210 dwelling units. Approximately 52 to 63 of these would be affordable pursuant to MIH, depending on the selection of the option. This would also include roughly 12,000 square feet of commercial space, 2,600 square foot youth center community facility space, and parking at the cellar level. So just by way of background and prior to the rest of the proposal, this was the result of discussions with the community board, with the Brooklyn Borough President's office, and with many other stakeholders. I would note that in the course of these conversations, while it is understood that the area prefers an area-wide rezoning, as do we, at the end of the day, Community Board 8 provided a conditional approval for this application, recognizing that this did comply with the M-Crown resolutions in providing mixed-use development, additional housing, additional affordable housing, and additional commercial use and jobs. And the Brooklyn Borough President, then Borough President Eric Adams, supported this proposal as well. So every agency that has seen this has approved this application in some form. We're asking that the council echo those statements as well. Next slide. And the slide after this shows the zoning map. What's worth noting with regards to the zoning map is that in 2013, next slide, much of this area to the south, roughly 55 blocks in the Crown Heights West rezoning, was rezoned to residential contextual districts. That was a 55 block area in 2013. The property here, inclusive of 6 blocks, including M11 zoning, were not rezoned. Why did that not happen at the time? Well, the M1 blocks would have required additional funds for environmental review, for environmental reporting, which was seen as too much of a bar at the time for the city to include those in the rezoning. So in 2015, as Councilmember Hudson mentioned, there was a push by the community board to sponsor an M-Crown area-wide rezoning and a study area. And while the Department of City Planning has initiated studies, no further action was taken on an area-wide rezoning. So you now have a situation where over the last 7 years, the area is no closer to a concrete plan in order to do the planning that is necessary for an area-wide rezoning. In the absence of that, the additional rezonings which have taken place in a vacuum right now have allowed for affordability. They've allowed for residential and affordable units to come online in this critical time when population has grown in the last 10 years by 15% and housing has only grown by 7%. Asking rents and median rents have risen by upwards of 40%. We now find ourselves in a housing crisis. And while we value the council member and we want to be partners here, the truth of the matter is that the creation of over 120 units of permanently affordable housing, including housing at deeply affordable levels, will have a major impact on people who may not have a voice in this community. You can see in front of you the zoning map. Again, the circled area denotes the area of the project as well as the rezoning area generally. Next slide. The next slide demonstrates the tax map, which shows with particularity what zoning is sought here. The R7A zoning sought along Pacific Street is the same zoning has been approved by the community board several times, including at the 1010 and 1050 Pacific Street rezonings, which allowed for R7A residential bulk. That at the time was approved by CB8. The C63 here, as fronts on Atlantic, is an R9A density. It is within the character of the surrounding area. There have been previous rezonings, including 840 Atlantic, which were approved in a larger density, and rezonings across the street, including Vanderbilt Avenue, which were approved at the same density. So it's a bulk that is known to the area. The difference as far as this rezoning is concerned is that the level of affordability pledged by the owner here is deeper and more vast than has been previously promised in any of these rezonings. We're actually going to get lower affordability and more units online for people who want to live in this housing. Next slide. So I'm going to look at the next two slides, this slide and the slide after this, merely to recap the land use actions. And then Nick Liberis, the project architect, is going to discuss the particularities of the building. Here you can see the area of the rezoning, C63 along Atlantic and R7A along Pacific. Important to note, Atlantic Avenue here is a 120-foot wide corridor. When the previous rezonings took place back in 2016 through 18, you were looking at Pacific Street was a 70-foot wide corridor and Grand Avenue at 70 feet wide. And so the floor area ratios approved for those rezonings was 4.6 to 5.6. Atlantic Avenue was decidedly different by a huge degree. You've got a 120-foot wide major thoroughfare in the area. You've got centrality to multiple lines of transportation, including buses, trains, and 7 subway lines. If you're going to put the density somewhere and you're going to have additional housing and additional affordable housing, this is a place that merits that housing. Particularly, a walk along Atlantic Avenue in this area demonstrates poorly utilized, underutilized lots, which have produced much of the development you see today, and that is no development. There are auto repair shops, empty lots, one-story vacant warehouses. Next slide. And the next slide merely demonstrates the zoning change map. Again, you can see the current zoning on the left. The rezoning would take place on the right. Again, you can see immediately south of the rezoning area is the rezoning that took place along Pacific in the 1010 Pacific Street rezoning, and the Grand Avenue and Pacific Street rezoning to the west at R7A and R7D. So here the zoning map would change to a C63A. Again, this is reflective of other zoning which has been approved in the area. With the next slide, I would turn this over to Nick Liberis, who will talk a little bit about the context as well as the decision for the programming of the building. Nick?
Thank you, Rich. Nick Liberis with Archimera. Hi. So just to jump right in, this slide shows the proximity of the M-Crown rezoning to these local neighborhoods, and you can see that it's at the nexus of all these different neighborhoods. So it's a very interesting spot along Atlantic. Rich mentioned that it hasn't been developed at all, and it really stands out like a sore thumb in this area because all of these, every single neighborhood is just very, very full of lower density housing for the most part, and this just seems like an amazing opportunity to kind of come in and not have any of the deleterious effects that you would have if you were doing something in an area that was already kind of like fortified with a lot of high density housing. So you can see that it's really proximal to the Pacific Park neighborhood coming up over there to the west. Next slide, please. And it's also proximal, like Rich said, to all this transportation infrastructure. You have many, many buses, you have many, many train lines. Everything is right there. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the proposed design, what we sought to do was to do something that was kind of a like a founding, kind of the heart of the neighborhood. Let's say. So this is something that permeated the intent the whole way. This site is right smack dab in the middle of the M-Crown district on this Atlantic stretch, and there's a lot of empty space around it. So that's something that we were considering. And we are seeking to make something over here that is something that would be very much of use to the neighborhood, that would enrich the neighborhood and also bring a lot of housing to the neighborhood. Next slide, please. This is looking westward towards downtown Brooklyn. Next slide, please. So you can see here that we've tried to be sensitive to the streetscape. The width of the street is over 120 feet. So really the only comp is Park Avenue that we could really think of. And there's a certain height to street width ratio, which is acceptable, like just in terms of letting sun down to the street. So we felt that this was a very applicable height based on the width of the street also. And we've taken great pains to make articulations to the building facade and to kind of push and pull on it such that you can open up seams and open up areas for light to get through. So this is something that creates a very interesting effect on the street, and it's very friendly to the street. You can see, for example, on this left side over here, we've set the building back about 10 feet from the side, and also on the right side, although you can't really see it. And we've notched the building, and something that this height allows us is a way to actually make these moves. If it's something which is lower, then you end up with a much more compressed building form, and it's just a lot blockier, and it's a lot less friendly to the street. And I'm sure all of you can evoke memories of a Park Avenue and just having this really kind of stiff street wall on either side. And in this case, this extra height gives us an opportunity to do something different. Next, please. So this was the foundational program that we had anticipated, that we were going back and forth with the community on. And it was a youth center, and there's this extra sidewalk widening that we're making an application for with DCP. And in addition to the extra width, what we were proposing was another 6 to 8 feet of a depth here, such that you could get something that kind of approximates a nice like plaza in its depth and in its like breadth. And we have, when we had originally designed this, we had this double height space looking down to the cellar where the youth center was partially. And the idea was that you would have this indoor-outdoor space where you could see what was going on down there. There'd be sports, there would be all sorts of amusements, things that would be happening down there, and it could be something that could really thicken this street experience, because Atlantic, as we know, is something which is primarily trafficy, primarily the east-west highway for freight and like material coming in and out of downtown Brooklyn. So this was something that we thought, like we could have this very organic program which could organically influence the streetscape, and also do something that we're always trying to do with our buildings, which is increase porosity. So we think it's important to be able to look through a building, to be able to kind of posit yourself as an individual human to this larger scale, and kind of like interact with it, because it's a much more pleasant experience from the street. You can also see something else that we had proposed. There's a big art program component here. We were thinking about doing panels that had debossing or some other such inscription, where you would be able to work with a local artist, and you could basically commission this. So the art is really a big foundational part of this experience. So Ellie is somebody who has another project going on in the neighborhood, and he's already committed to doing murals on that project. And his like vision for this area, in the absence of all this other building, was to turn it into something kind of akin to the Wynwood district, obviously at a different scale, but you end up with a bunch of muraling and a bunch of art all over these buildings. So the thought is that, as things come on, you want to make this as attractive as you can to kind of, to kind of foster the next round of development as it all fills in. So, this is something where it makes it a much more pleasant experience, and we think it has a lot of merit. Next. You can see over here the muraling. So on the sides of the buildings, they would be programmed with these murals. The building to the far right is the building which is under construction right now, which will have murals which will be visible from Atlantic. And you can see kind of where we're starting to go with this. Next slide, please. This is the view from the back. This would be the entry to the youth center. This is also potentially the entry to any future M Crown use. It's a single building. You could access it from both sides. So you have the opportunity to have access to the program from both sides. You also have a residential lobby, and you have the R7D structure on this. I'm sorry, R7D structure on this back side over here. Next slide, please. So we made a lot of effort to reach out to DOT on this. We had gotten feedback that it could be helpful to us to kind of engage the city and move things forward. because right now there's no comprehensive plan for Atlantic, and in the absence of there being a citywide rezone, like a neighborhood rezoning backed by the city, this is something which kind of falls to the wayside. So we took it upon ourselves to take these first steps and kind of push things forward. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from DOT. We've gone back and forth with them on this plan, and we also there was this foundational element, which is the rain swale, which came from Eric Adams' office back when he was borough president. And this is really kind of the master stroke right here with this rain swale, because this thing sets up a certain rhythm on the street, which is both human scale and also lets you thicken the sidewalk even further. So you can see in these areas where we have the rain swale, you can get to like 36-foot depth. So this is a very substantially scaled urban place, which kind of deals with the real politics situation of like Atlantic being something which is very, very trafficky. So we're not seeking to change this essence of Atlantic, which would be a horrible thing for the city. We're just seeking to kind of play the ball where it lies, and I think we're doing a decent job. What we're doing over here is we're protecting the pedestrian experience with these trees. There's a bollard set up at every single swale, and we have protected cast in place dividers that are planted up on top, and there could be street plazas on the backside of those. There could be dining sheds. There could be uni pods where you store bikes. There's a bunch of different things that we could do. All of this was made possible because between the two applications, 880 and 1042, we had enough traffic data where we could kind of make an assessment that the amount of parking could be reduced to some extent. So this is something that would have to be furthered. And just to stress what this is not a final proposal. This is a set of like individual tactics between the rain swale, the bollards, the sidewalk widening, the street plaza. All these different things are our constituent pieces, kit of parts that DOT has approved conceptually. That could be the start of something for this entire corridor. So we've done a lot to kind of bring it to this point, and we're hoping that that this process back and forth between the community board, DOT, the council member could continue. So this could come to fruition. Or something like this. These are, this is a very initial thing. Next, please. So this is just this is what it would be without it. And even this, we have some Arts Commission sidewalk stuff happening here. So it's a nicer than regular sidewalk. If you toggle back and forth, you can see what a dramatic, difference it is just in terms of the street presence. Same thing over here. So next slide. So the building gets pushed back. The sidewalk is incredibly thickened, and you have these oases, for where you enter the building. So it makes it a much more pleasant street side experience. Next slide, please. These are so this is the site plan. Next, please. So you can see the site. It's a through lot. It's situated between Atlantic and Pacific over here. The bulk of it is on this Atlantic side. Next, please. Next, please. The building you can see is right now proposed at 175 feet high, 17 floors. We have either option 1 or option 3. My client is offering a higher tranche of affordability that is mandated by the zoning. Next, please. This is the rear view. This is the Pacific Street view. You can see the smaller building vis-a-vis the big building. Next one, please. Even though they're actually the same building, it's just it has two different parts on each side. Next, please. So what we had arrived at after going back and forth with the community board and with the borough president's office was to put the youth center to the side for now, just because it seems like there might be more of a demand for an elderly center or for some other M-Crown use. So what my client is committing to is 30% of the ground floor for M-Crown, which is about 5,000 square feet, and then another 5,000 square feet in the cellar. Now, this area that's in the cellar is like roughly in the same spot that it was before. when we had the youth center. So there still is that opportunity, should there be public will for this, to open the floor back up and to have that indoor outdoor setup, which was so nice looking. Next please. This is the distribution of these units. Next please. Same for the back building portion. Next please. So the two potential levels of affordability are 40% AMI and 60%, and these would be the unit breakdowns based on these two different levels. Now, the zoning framework for option 1 is 25% of the units, and my client is offering 30%. So this is some 8 to 10 more units depending on how it gets chopped up. And option 3. Instead of 20%, he's offering 25%. So to my knowledge, this is something that in this type of rezoning is without precedent. So, hopefully this is something that that the community board and the council member can look kindly on in light of this housing shortage, that we have everywhere. So next please. Okay, and this is the wonky slide that nobody wants to see. So with that, my presentation is over, and thank you for your time, everybody. Can't hear you.
Sarah, you're muted.
Yeah, we can hear you now. No, we still can't hear you. There's a mute at the far bottom left. It kind of pops up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you now.
Okay. The M-Crown framework calls for the true mixed-use development with housing, jobs, and the diversity of community-enhancing uses such as light, industrial, community facility, and art space. Does your proposal meet these goals? What kind of mixed-use spaces are you proposing? And are you willing to enter into a binding agreement to memorialize this commitment?
As the applicant of record, I will take the question. As Nick Liberis, the architect, just detailed, the original plan for this particular M-Crown space was initially proposed as a youth center, which was articulated in the rendering that we just presented. After presenting to the community board, we understood that they would rather focus on an actual M-Crown use, which is more of a light industrial job creating type of space, which is why the schematic, the plans that we just proposed subsequently were reflecting 10,000 square feet of M-Crown space, which is job creating. In addition to that, we also understand the lack of senior care facility in the immediate area. And so this, depending on the ultimate will of the community and the council member, we would be happy to provide either of the three options: youth center, M-Crown, or senior care facility. And yes, we will be willing to enter into a community benefits agreement and restrictive declaration to bind the restricted use.
Thank you. Do you have a plan in place to ensure local hiring and MWBE participation during construction? If so, how many local hires do you anticipate for a project like this? And how can we ensure follow-up and progress reports on these commitments?
Yeah, so we do have, as a matter of fact, we do have an NWB contractor sign up to testify later today, later at the hearing. We anticipate to use anywhere from 25 to 35% of the labor during construction being attributed to MWB vendors, and about the same amount of about a third of the labor being sourced by local, local hires. At the peak of construction, we would anticipate about 120 to 150 workers on site. So that equates to about 50 local hires during construction. We also sign on 32BJ for the post-construction to make sure that the building offers prevailing wages.
Thank you. And before I turn it over to Councilmember Hudson, she brought up a lot of concerns with Atlantic Avenue. Can you just briefly talk about how you're trying to collaborate with her to address the concerns on Atlantic Avenue and the comprehensive plan that we're trying to push the city to come up with to address these concerns that you're trying to give the council member, please?
I'm sorry, you skipped for the last sentence. I didn't hear the last sentence.
Sorry, can you just talk about the support that you're giving the council member
Okay.
to push the city to come up with a comprehensive plan for Atlantic Avenue?
Yeah, so as Nick mentioned earlier, we reached out back in January to Department of Transportation to share with them our traffic analysis studies and come up together with a plan for Atlantic Avenue as far as the streetscape is concerned and the sidewalk. As Nick mentioned earlier, we proposed and we committed to an 8-foot sidewalk widening that would make the sidewalk that much wider. We also proposed that light canopy that you saw in the rendering, and as well as the concept of an urban plaza. So our approach to additional safety for the Atlantic Avenue corridor is a more lively sidewalk and a more, more lively sidewalk with, light, trees, plants, seating area, benches. And so we submitted these initial studies and renderings to DOT, who was very favorable to them. Obviously, they have to take it and make it their own. But we initiated the discussion with them early January, and we've had a tremendous amount of back and forth over the past couple of months to come up with a clean vision. And what I can say is that whatever ultimate vision DOT ends up coming up with, we're willing to commit, again, under the same CBA, to implement on our project.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to Councilmember Hudson if she has any questions. Councilmember Hudson.
Thank you, Chair Riley. I guess before I get into the questions, I wanted to clarify a point that Mr. Lobel made earlier. Community Board 8 did not approve with conditions. They disapproved with conditions. The first, and I'll just want to list the conditions in order of preference. The first preference being that the application be withdrawn in favor of a neighborhood-wide rezoning. The second one, that if that is not possible, the applicant removes lots 29, 33, and 40 from its applications and files a zoning text amendment to create a contextual variation of the existing C6-1 zoning district with required non-residential frontage consistent with the regulations of the special enhanced commercial district with base FAR of 6 and incentive FAR of 1 for non-residential use. If this is not possible, that in lieu of the proposed C6-3A district, lot 40 be removed from the application, that all lots be mapped MIH options 1 and 3, and that the following further action be taken. That the applicant make a binding commitment to restrict use of minimum of 5,400 square feet of floor area. I won't get into all the technical stuff, but to offer required affordable apartments under MIH option 3 and to limit building height fronting Atlantic Avenue to 15 stories. If this is not possible, that lot 40 be removed from the application and the applicant make a binding commitment subject to the establishment of C6-2A zoning in lieu of the proposed C6-3A zoning to restrict residential use on lots 29 and 33 to 5.2 FAR. If this is not possible, the lot to be rezoned C4-5D. So I just wanted to make those points to clarify. Mr. Pariente, can I just ask how long you've owned this property on Atlantic Avenue?
About the equivalent of 2 years.
Okay. And did you purchase the property with the intent to develop a residential building?
Yes.
If this application is not approved, what would you do with the property?
Very limited uses given the current market for warehouse space. I mean, most of Atlantic Avenue are currently either empty yards or storage space. So we will probably end up having to keep it. I mean, it's only M1, so there's really nothing else we could do with it. So we would just keep it as a storage space.
Keep it as a storage space. Keep the existing lots as storage space, or build a storage facility.
Whatever is built there is already above what could be built. So we would there's nothing else we could do with it.
Okay, but you would keep the property.
Yeah.
Okay. Since 2015, Community Board 8 has worked on the M Crown Community Plan for this area. Did you participate in that planning?
Very much so.
And how does this proposal relate to the M Crown framework?
So the M Crown use at the base actually on Atlantic Avenue goes above and beyond the required framework. Part of the original M Crown framework did not require M Crown uses on the Atlantic Avenue corridor. It required it on the side avenues. So we went above and beyond on that. The density on Pacific Street at R7A follows the exact vision for M Crown. And then the density on Atlantic Avenue was originally proposed by Community Board 8 at C62A. City Planning requested us to make it C63A as they thought it was more contextual to what was currently being developed. In exchange for that, the Community Board asked us to give more incentives in order to justify the additional density, hence the deeper affordability, the additional M Crown space, and yeah.
Thank you for that. Since 2019, there have been 5 private applications approved in the M Crown area that will bring a total of nearly 1,000 projected units of housing. If approved as proposed, your property and 880 Atlantic Avenue may bring over 500 further new units. And according to DCP's housing production database, over 6,000 new units of housing have already been built within a half mile of the M Crown area since 2010. Do you believe that private developers can deliver the infrastructure and planning necessary to accommodate this growth?
We can participate to the extent possible to our property. Obviously, we cannot participate beyond our property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you support a neighborhood-wide community plan for the area?
Yes, I do.
If so, why should we move forward with approving these applications with no guarantee from the city on a plan or community investments? Or I guess I should say, considering you do approve, why should we move forward with approving these applications or yours specifically with no guarantee from the city on a comprehensive plan or any community investments?
Well, because
Ellie,
one
can I-
does not preclude the other. I'm sorry, I'm so involved in this neighborhood that I have to answer the question. One obviously does not preclude the other. The benefit of one private application, so long as it follows the guidelines of the M Crown rezoning, is the certainty of delivering units and affordable units now, as opposed to the uncertainty that goes with waiting for a neighborhood-wide rezoning. As we know, even if a neighborhood-wide rezoning was to be engaged now, it will be several years before it is implemented between the environmental review, the negotiation with the different community actors, and then the final implementation. It will be somewhere between 5 to 8 years before the first unit is delivered. This allows for the development of, like you said, between the 2 buildings, over 120 units of affordable units right now at option 3, which is, very rarely seen. In addition to that, the fact that we're willing to commit to more than the MIH option is an additional, concession that would set a fantastic precedent. I'm not aware of many developers who are agreeing to not only provide option 3, but offer more units than required. So as you know, option 3 requires 20% to be reserved for 40% AMI. We are willing to go to 25%, which to my knowledge I haven't seen recently, or 30% of option 1, which would deliver on our project alone 62 to 65 affordable units. So the difference is we would deliver more units than we will be required to on the neighborhood rezoning as far as affordability, and we would deliver them right now, meaning within, we would start construction, shortly thereafter and deliver them in about 2 years.
Thank you. I want to give Mr. Lobel an opportunity to chime in if he has anything to add.
Sure. Thank you, Council Member. Merely just to echo Ellie's statement with regards to the opportunity for the city to proceed on an area-wide rezoning. Having been involved in several of the prior land use actions in Community Board 8, and having maintained, a relationship with the community board throughout that time. I think one of the important things to note here is that proceeding on this rezoning doesn't preclude the area from being rezoned generally. And it's an important point because when we talk to the city about this, and we're very careful when we file these actions, obviously it's a great investment of people's time and energy to bring an application. The one thing that the Department of City Planning has always said is that the same tens of thousands of people involved in planning for infrastructure for the city and for Brooklyn and for this community board that are present and doing so before the rezoning are doing so after the rezoning. The people who would most lose out in the event that this property was not rezoned are people who would benefit from this housing, and importantly, people who would benefit from the affordable units, which are over and above what is required on other rezonings. So again, other than the fact that you have our word, and Ellie is someone who has now been through this process with this community board more than once, we're partners here. We want to be involved in an area-wide rezoning. We want to be, be the ones who are the leaders in terms of street improvements, infrastructure improvements, our work with DOT specifically on Atlantic Avenue. We would value that opportunity to be good neighbors and good partners. But, importantly, as Ellie said, if you're looking at years and years and years, it can be 6 to 8 years before you're even in hearings for a neighborhood-wide rezoning. Those units are not coming on for a long, long time. And we have the opportunity now to strike and to actually put some people in challenging positions into units.
Okay, so just a couple of follow-up questions. One is, in the event government acts too slow or not at all, do you think it is private developers' responsibility to push forward something like a comprehensive plan?
I can answer, but then again, Rich, you do much more of these. I wouldn't say it's the responsibility of the developer to put together a comprehensive plan. It is their responsibility to contribute and participate and give feedback on the feasibility of different scenarios, which is exactly what I've personally been doing with Committee Board 8. I've been attending every meeting, if not, 90% of the meetings over the past 4 or 5 years. And I've constantly been giving the feedback from a development standpoint as to what is feasible and what is not. And, the great thing about my prior project, and hopefully this one, is that it also sends a message to city planning as to what is actually feasible or not. Because for a few years, there was this constant debate between the Community Board 8 and city planning, with city planning saying, oh, if you ask for such and such uses on the ground floor, no developers will build it. Or if you ask for, such affordable options, nobody will build it. And with somebody like me coming in and signing restrictive declaration that I will build just that, Community Board has now that proof to show city planning that, hey, it can be done. Here's a developer that's actually doing it. So why don't we implement it? So that's my interpretation of the participation that I can bring to the table.
I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, the fact that you're expressing support for a comprehensive plan that would, presumably be led by the city, Department of City Planning. And, at the same time stating that you could be the, the one to sort of usher the city towards that greater plan, but at the same time implying that it is the responsibility of folks like, the council members and the city to ultimately deliver a comprehensive plan, to the community. So how can we do both things? How can we both continue to approve projects one by one that say they're going to adhere to a particular framework without giving the city the opportunity to create and implement said framework? I guess that's what I'm, struggling with, but I don't want to keep going back and forth on that. I just wanted to make my point for the record. I do want to follow up with another question about your commitments. You're saying that you would be willing to commit beyond the 20% deeply affordable housing at 40% AMI as part of option 3. Would this be a legally binding commitment?
Yes, it would be as part of the CBA. And just to add to what you just said, it could be one or the other. It could be an additional 5% on the option one, which would bring us to 30% of affordable units, and has some great benefits as well, which I would love the opportunity to discuss.
Couple other questions. How do the anticipated housing, both affordable and market rate units and rent levels, match neighborhood demographics and needs?
Well, we've designed the building and the unit mix based on direct feedbacks from the community board. If you notice on the application, the square footage averages of the units is larger than the typical new developments nowadays that is focusing on micro units. The community board was constantly asking for larger units, which is why we basically increased the average sizes of the apartments, as well as delivered more family apartments. We have a decent amount of 2 and 3 bedrooms, which represents the actual demographic of the neighborhood.
Okay, and I just want to, make a quick point that not everybody here and who might be watching has necessarily read through the proposals with the same level of detail as I have. So part of asking these questions is so that we can get the answers on the record.
No, of course.
What sustainability and resiliency measures are incorporated into the building's design and construction, such as incorporating blue, green, white roof treatment, passive house, rain gardens, solar panels, or wind turbines?
I'm going to give this one to Nick, which is what he lives for. Just try to keep it within less than an hour, Nick.
Oh, okay, fine. So yeah, we have green roofs everywhere. Local law 97 and a slew of other local laws that came out in the past couple of years compel us to do this. We have stormwater detention on these roofs. The rain spill that we've been proposing for the sidewalk is something which would actually greatly reduce combined sewer overflow, because what it's doing is increasing the catchment area into the street, into the middle of Atlantic, basically doubling the size of the catchment area that it would otherwise handle with the building alone. Passive house is an interesting question. There's a lot of money right now in passive house. We're currently doing 6 passive house projects. I'm trying to push everybody, all of my clients, towards passive house and also geothermal. NYCC, tax incentives, all sorts of other funding. Con Ed gives a ton of money for this stuff right now. So we're in this unique golden window right now to really take advantage of all this stuff. And if Ellie decides to hire us, then we will definitely push him to do that type of thing. And it's really not a hard push right now, just because it makes a lot of financial sense and the buyback is super quick. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Another quick follow-up to that specifically, and then I want to go back to something really quickly, but will you commit to an all-electric building?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, so the big issue typically has been makeup air for kitchen hoods and makeup air for larger PA spaces. But the geothermal is actually the cheat code for that. So once you put that in, it's not an issue. And we have commitments now on several hospitality projects from very, very major chefs that are just saying, fine, we could deal with this. So yeah, there will be no gas.
Okay, great. Just going back to the CBA really quickly, it's not legally binding. So would you be open to a restrictive declaration?
Yes.
Can I address this for a second, Ellie? So, council member, on the Pacific and Grand rezoning, in which Mr. Pariente was also the applicant, we spent hours and hours with Community Board 8 hammering out a CBA, which was eventually recorded for that property. So there's already kind of a framework in place that represents a lot of work on behalf of the Community Board to make that a binding agreement. So as an initial matter, we would seek to replicate that exact agreement in terms of this property. Ellie, would that be accurate?
Yeah, we spent to the credit of the Community Board and their legal counsel, we spent more than hours. We spent several weeks hammering out the structure. And so, yeah, the benefit here would be to use the same structure, which is legally binding and recorded on title.
Okay, thank you. Your proposal includes a special permit to reduce parking requirements, but not eliminate them entirely. Why include any parking spaces at all? in this transit-rich part of Brooklyn.
So thank you, council member. The special permit you referred to is 74533. I know that there's been a lot of discussion recently, particularly in accordance with pronouncements of the Brooklyn Borough President as well as certain council members regarding the reduction or elimination of parking. I probably would defer to Kevin Williams, who's on the call. Kevin is the environmental consultant here. I would note that the parking reduction here is substantial and greater than 2/3 of the parking would be reduced, leaving the entirety of the development with 20 parking spaces, which from an environmental standpoint, Kevin, maybe you can speak to the sufficiency of that and any impact that might cause or lack thereof.
Or Kevin Williams, Equity Environmental. Councilmember Hudson, thank you for the question. As Mr. LaBelle noted, we've encountered this question and engaged directly with multiple council members. And we certainly, I think myself, as well as Rich and Mr. Parenti, certainly support this notion that by providing parking, that you're basically potentially inducing, car ownership, which exacerbates traffic problems. And I think here, the goal was to find a balancing act. Given the lack of off-street parking resources in the area, and the fact that it's sort of a very nominal amount of spaces, I think it was seen as an attempt to acknowledge the fact that we're in a transit supportive environment, but at the same time recognize the fact that we have a lot of capacity issues in terms of on-street parking. As you noted, there are multiple other rezonings that were approved many years ago, some of which one of Mr. Parenti's projects currently coming out of the ground are being worked on at the foundation level. And so I think it's with this notion that as you sort of activate Atlantic Avenue and as some of these other rezonings come online, that a reasonable amount of parking to support 20 residents is sort of a balancing act between sort of going no parking and trying to supply a little bit to prevent a potential impact to on-street parking resources in the area.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a plan in place to ensure local hiring and MWBE participation during construction? And by MWBE, I specifically mean locally owned Black and Brown subcontractors.
Yes, as I told Chair Riley earlier at the hearing, we are currently using on another project close to 1/3 of the building, well, between 25% to 1/3 with MWBE trade and subcontractors. We absolutely intend on doing the same for this project. And as a matter of fact, one of them is signed on to testify on the project later after this testimony.
Great. And have you thought about union jobs during construction?
Yeah, I mean, that's the GC usually really does the hiring. We're obviously not at that stage yet. But yeah, we was probably, I mean, inevitably some of the, a decent chunk of the trades would be union.
Okay, and then I believe this might be my last question. What is your response to those who believe that approving additional large-scale, predominantly market rate buildings may encourage more gentrification and displacement?
So that's a simple question. So again, with my limited, I can't claim to have a full comprehension of the macro impact and all of the many impacts being involved. All I can say is that by committing to provide more of the tools that have already been created by the city, I commit to doing more than necessary, right? So by providing more than the required MIH units, I am going above and beyond what city envisions as a responsible development. After that, I mean, it's a relatively deep question to answer. I would hope that, like I said, the 25 or 30% affordable units that we're providing really help alleviate that issue. And at the same time, the one thing I would answer compared to many applications that I've seen is that this is located on a strictly industrial site, which will generate absolutely no displacement from the actual project. We're not demoing any buildings. We're not vacating any tenants. We have an empty junkyard and storage space, which is making way for a residential building, which will contain 60 affordable units, amongst other things. So I would hope that really it doesn't end up causing any displacement, quite the opposite.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time. Chair Riley, subcommittee members, council, and staff. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to ask my questions.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Councilmember Hudson. Just so everyone's on notice, we're going to be putting the panelists and the council members on mute. If you want to ask a question or respond to a question, just use the raise hand function and the Sergeant at Arms will call on you. I now invite my colleagues to ask questions. If you have questions for the applicant panel, please use the raise hand button on the participant panel. Do any council members have any questions for this panel?
Chair, I don't see any council members with questions.
Thank you, Council. There being no questions for this panel, the applicant panel is excused. Council, are there members of the public who wish to testify on 1034-1042 Atlantic Ave proposal?
Yes, Chair, we have several members of the public that have signed up to speak for this item. So I would just make a brief announcement that for members of the public here to testify, please note that witnesses will generally be called in panels of 4. And if you're a member of the public, sign up to testify that on the 1034-1042 Atlantic Avenue proposal. Please stand by when you hear your name being called and prepare to speak when the chair says that you may begin. Please also know that once all panelists in your group have completed their testimony, you will be removed from the meeting as a group and the next group of speakers will be introduced. Once removed, participants may continue to view the live stream broadcast of this hearing on the council website. We will now hear from the first panel, which will be comprised of Sarah Lesueur, Elaine Weinstein, Peter Crashes, and Mimi Mitchell.
Members of the public will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please do not begin until the Sergeant at Arms has started the clock. You'll be given 2 minutes. After 2 minutes is finished, we will ask you if you could stop and you could give the rest of your remarks to the Land Use Committee. You may begin as soon as we get you guys in. Do we have them in, Council?
Let me double check, Chair. So the first person on this panel will be Sarah Lesueur.
Time starts.
Sarah, are you there?
Yeah, hi, my name is Sarah Lazar and I am a member of the Crown Heights Tenant Union and I am also a member of the CB8 Land Use Committee. Okay, thank you. So one item that Councilmember Hudson brought up that's really important is the amount of displacement and the racially specific displacement that's taken place in this neighborhood. And, you know, as a CHTU member, I want to sort of focus on that particular angle at the moment. Some people have probably read 19,000 Black people have already been displaced from Community District 8, which is both Crown Heights North and Prospect Heights between 2010 and 2020. And this is more than any other community district in the entire city. And DCP's own study of the M-Crown area shows that 11,000 of those Black people were lost from the M-Crown area. And during this time period, the land values and rents have skyrocketed because our neighborhood was targeted by the real estate industry. And of course, the first casualties of this were, of course, Black tenants and homeowners. And if you've been following the news, the Crown Heights Tenant Union has just fought a very intense battle alongside a family of Black homeowners in CB8 to prevent them from being evicted from their home where they've lived since 1951 because they were targeted for deed theft. Like so many other Black homeowners in central Brooklyn, where skyrocketing property values have made deed theft to be a very attractive scheme. So our union's members are both long-term residents and new arrivals, and we fight together because we all lose out when the real estate industry is given carte blanche to maximize profits with no regard to the community stability or well-being. And that's why we're calling for the community to be allowed to set the agenda for our own neighborhood. We want community planning.
Time.
Thank you, Sarah.
Apologies, I was muted. And the next speaker on this panel is Elaine Weinstein.
Time starts.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Elaine.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm here to discuss my opposition to this specific project, as well as to the project that's coming up, 870, 888 Atlantic Avenue. And as a 7-year resident of Prospect Heights, a lifelong Brooklynite, my husband and I moved here from Park Slope for a more diverse neighborhood. For 7 years, we've watched the Heights become far less diverse due to ongoing development of large luxury buildings with very limited affordable housing. The developers have successfully chased people of color from our neighborhood, which has caused direct and indirect displacement. And I want to focus today on one specific factor, because there are many other speakers to focus on others, and that is open space, or rather the absence of open space. First, I want you to think about your own life, your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, your dogs. What do you look forward to doing with them? You want to go to a green space so they can run, play, and enjoy the open area. There's virtually no space for that in our neighborhood. The need that we can all agree upon is, especially with the escalation of the pandemic, has been for much more open space. So let's look at the recent development of Atlantic Yards Pacific Park. The neighborhood was promised private park areas, and I'll give you one data point to remember, not a great many, but New York City's goal for open space is 1.5 acres for every 1,000 people. By the time Atlantic Yards is completed, we will have far less. In fact, excuse me, due to the numbers put out by New York City Environmental Quality Review, we will have 0.15 acres per 1,000, and this is prior to these two developments that are on the docket today. It's totally unacceptable and actually pathetic. And now add all the new residents coming in, and we are discussing today, you're basically saying that we deserve nothing more in terms of open space.
Time.
Whether you're, oh, sorry, that's it, huh? Well, I ask you as community leaders to, that within your power it is to vote down these requested developments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elaine.
The next speaker will be Peter Crashes.
Time starts.
Hi, yes, I'm Peter Crashes. I'm the current president of the North Prospect Heights Association. We are deeply concerned by the emergence of individual private ULIP applications for Atlantic Avenue. We call on the New York City Council to reject them. The use of individual private applications to unlock development potential on Atlantic Avenue undercuts the community's leverage to develop a holistic plan that addresses an eventual near doubling of Prospect Heights population. There are already 6,450 new units of housing approved for Atlantic Yards Pacific Park. The progression of proposed new developments on Atlantic Avenue will add thousands more residents, and the impact on infrastructure must be considered comprehensively. The consideration of individual applications also fails to address the implications, this very serious implications of indirect displacement caused by the introduction of such a large number of new market rate units. These proposals should be rejected, and we ask our new city council member, borough president, and mayor to work with us, the community, to deliver a better plan. The absence of a transparently developed comprehensive plan lets city agencies and our elected officials off the hook and leaves the community with changes that can in reality contradict declared goals. While imperfect, neighborhood-wide plans have far broader scope. With individual applications, any benefits are largely limited to the property lines that are controlled by the developer, This is compounded by the approval of districts that include property outside of any agreement because the property is not controlled by the applicant, and the need for the community board to offer development bonuses in exchange for benefits which have been defined by a few behind closed doors. Just look at the environmental study for each of these individual developments across numerous categories of study: schools, displacement, open space. The impact of each individual development does not meet the threshold for study. Yet we know that in aggregate, the combined impact of these developments will be significant. This is why Mr. Pariente couldn't answer the question about the effect of all these market rate units being introduced into the neighborhood and in relation to displacement. This is why we say the city is letting the community down and itself off the hook. It is not the first time we've gone through this. In Atlantic Yards, the city let a private developer use a state process to escape any enforceable obligations it did not choose to meet. So we already have shortfalls like 1,877 elementary school seats if the project is built in full, regularly congested intersections, etc. Really plead on the city council just to stick with the plan and let's hit a community plan for the neighborhood. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
The last speaker on this panel is Mimi Mitchell.
Time starts.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Mitchell.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Mimi Mitchell. I am a tenant. I've been here for over 17 years in the Prospect Heights area. I am also a member of Crown Heights Tenant Union, and I also am a volunteer advocate at Legal Hand Crown Heights, which serves Crown Heights, Prospect Heights, and all the surrounding areas in Brooklyn. I just want to talk to you guys about I didn't prepare a statement simply because I wanted to be open-minded and I wanted to hear what the developers had to say. And I'm sorry, but there's nothing that they've said. In fact, they've made me even more nervous and scared about this development. So with that, I cannot lend my support, and I am representing a whole community of people who are also not going to be able to lend their support to this development. The effects of displacement are a lot more than where you just built, than the site you build on. And I think that the developers need to understand that. Me as a tenant, I've been taken to court over 8 times by my landlord, simply because the rent I pay just isn't up to par with the gentrification that has been taking place in the area. I am also not what the area wants to see anymore visually in terms of culture and in terms of race. I am a Black female. My building was 99% Black when I moved in. It is now 1% Black, and that 1% is me. I never envisioned a day that I would be uncomfortable in my own home, or I would be uncomfortable in my own neighborhood. The gentrification that has taken place has not been one where communities collaborate. It has been one where communities divide against each other. This development will only create more of that. And that's also due to the economic disparity that happens between our communities.
Time.
The amount, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell.
Chair, the next panel will be Sharon Weatherburn, Marissa Williams, Reverend W. Taharka Robinson, James Neville, and Bilma Pearlstein. So the first speaker on the second panel is Sharon Weatherburn.
Time starts.
We can't hear you, Ms. Weatherburn. No, we can't hear you.
Sir, I think she is unmuted. I believe she's having some trouble with her audio.
Yeah, Ms. Weatherburn, I think it's your audio. We could circle back with you if you want to just fix it real quick. Is that okay? Just give me a thumbs up if that's okay. All right, let's circle back to Ms. Weatherburn. Council, please.
Yes, so the next speaker, while Ms. Weatherburn works on her audio, will be Marissa Williams.
Time starts.
Good afternoon, Chair Riley and members of the committee. My name is Marissa Williams, and I'm a representative of 32BJ here on behalf of the more than 85,000 members to express our support for this project. We're pleased to announce that the developer EMP Capital has reached out early to make a credible commitment to provide prevailing wage jobs to the future building service workers at this site. These jobs are typically filled by local members of the community, and because of this commitment, will pay family-sustaining wages, which help bring working families into the middle class. These apartments are needed for working people in Brooklyn. This commitment to good prevailing wage jobs will give opportunity for upward mobility, security, and dignity to working class families. 32BJ supports responsible developers who invest in the communities where they build. We know that this development will continue to uphold the industry standard and provide opportunities for working families to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa.
The next speaker on this panel will be Reverend W. Taharka Robinson.
Time starts.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the members of the committee. I just want to say, first of all, that everyone's talking about people being displaced. And it seems that this project would allow an amount of housing, permanently affordable housing, providing a higher percentage of affordable housing at a deeper affordability than the other private zones. Now, also, this project was approved by the former borough president, who's now a mayor, and the former city councilwoman. And so what I'm trying to understand is that we do need more housing and more affordable housing that we need to do, and we can get this housing as soon as possible. And we are for rezoning, but it doesn't need to be delayed. Doesn't need to be rezoning delayed, because what will happen is it will take a number of years to put this project back together. That's also already been approved by Community Board number 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Council, can we try Ms. Weatherburn to see if she's working?
Ms. Weatherburn, can you try your audio?
No, we still can't hear you, Ms. Weatherburn. So you want to sign out and then sign back in, and we'll make sure we'll bring you back. Sign out and then sign back in just to see if it works, okay? We'll bring you back. All right.
Thank you. So the next speaker will be James Neville.
Time starts.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Neville.
Yes, good afternoon, committee. As you know, that New York City is in a very much housing crisis. As a resident of Brooklyn for the past 35, 40 years, we can't afford to delay the construction of this new housing. This project will bring deeply affordable apartments to the building and will upgrade the area. Partnering with private sectors has helped move these projects along faster. I believe that I'm a resident. I've traveled Atlantic Avenue for years, the Barclays Center. I actually worked with James Caldwell, who was initiated this project years and years ago. I believe that we definitely need to move forward to support this project on Atlantic Avenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Council, real quick, I see Councilmember Hudson's hand up. Councilmember Hudson?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a note. I have to actually hop off and go to another hearing for another committee, but I will be back in just a bit, and I have staff on the line listening, watching, and taking notes. So I just wanted to make a note of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hudson. Council, you may continue.
The next speaker, and I believe is the last speaker on this panel, Vilma Perlstein.
Time starts.
Vilma, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Vilma.
Okay, hi. So I'm Lima Perlstein. My company is Perfect Enterprises. I'm a minority woman's owned city certified construction business company. I've been working with Mr. Ellie, and it is the Civic Street project right now. He has awarded me the entire, and I'm doing the entire envelope of the building. I'm doing his exterior windows, his EIFS, waterproofing, and roofing. And this job has been so amazing to me. It has been helping me get the business rolling. I have the nicest things to say about these. Sorry about that. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. You keep going mute and then you're unmuted.
Okay, yeah, sorry, because someone was calling in. So I just have the nicest things to say about these people. They're definitely, their goal is to help the community, to help the local businesses, to help us, the minority businesses out there that struggle, you know, sometimes to get work, especially as a woman. I'm always the underdog in the construction field. So having this opportunity with him on this other project, and hopefully if he gets awarded this, if I can do, I can do some more business with him. I definitely highly recommend it. I think it's a project we all need. The city, the locals, the residents, everyone's greatly going to benefit from this. So definitely a yes for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, that was the last speaker on that panel, and I don't see any council members with questions. So I'm going to move on to call on the next panel, which will be Jack Robinson, Nicole Lamy, Kaja Cool, Kathy Iseline, and Esteban Giron. First speaker will be Jack Robinson.
Time starts.
Jack, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
You may begin your
testimony.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I live at 1022 Pacific Street. The 1034, 1042 Atlantic Avenue proposal is directly across the street from me, and it unprecedentedly cuts transcontinentally through the block from Atlantic to Pacific. Much of this neighborhood is zoned commercial and industrial, and I understand that the zoning is not correct. It's not what we need. And I get that we need more housing in our neighborhood, and our neighborhood is going to change. New York is not for the nostalgic. The vision of this change is missing. The two Atlantic Avenue proposals before you are haphazard and lack the context and cohesiveness that our real beautiful Brooklyn neighborhood deserves. My main issue is infrastructure. We do not have a comprehensive neighborhood plan, a plan where schools and transportation, open space, green space, and sewage are taken into mind. M-Crown seemed like a big compromise weighted towards the developers. Now that plan is even being trampled on by these proposals. There's a well thought through plan I saw for East New York. I'd like to see something like that for Atlantic Avenue between Flatbush and Bedford Avenues. In my opinion, M-Crown does not exist anymore. As a member of the CB8 Land Use Committee, I've been shocked to see these two Atlantic Avenue proposals have been handled on top of the monthly meetings that we had two special meetings, which consisted of developers and lawyers spouting propaganda. This, without a cohesive neighborhood plan, I urge you to reject 1034, 1042 Atlantic Avenue project. We want development, planned development that keeps neighborhood, people, and infrastructures in mind. The developer and lawyers seem to be the only ones that succeed in this current process.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Council, before we continue, I see that Sharon Weatherburn has joined us.
Yes, Ms. Weatherburn, can you hear us? And can you unmute yourself so that you can speak?
So let's hope. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you, Ms. Weatherburn.
Perfect. I'm very excited. Thank you again for the opportunity and allowing me the time to which I would be able to rejoin this meeting. So my name is Sharon Wedderburn. I currently chair the Land Use Committee for Community Board 8. When Community Board 8 began its work on the M1 zone along Atlantic Avenue, it was conceived as a community rezoning. Earlier in the presentation, you know that the M1, the light manufacturing zone, was excluded from the Crown Heights West rezoning simply because of the additional requirements for this. With such, we envision a district where we would be able to have affordable housing, light manufacturing use, and community uses. We've worked on this for a long time. We've worked on this for 7 years. We support this project, and the reason why we support the project, it adheres to the board's vision, and we've won support from the past borough president and the previous city council meeting member. There have been several private zonings in this area, and it's simply because the Department of City Planning, we have been unable to move forward with which we could create the M Crown zone. As such, all applications that have come before us hew to the M Crown zone's vision, especially with regards to deep affordability and to be able to make sure that we limit the heights to 15 stories for these buildings. The applicant has worked consistently with the community and has demonstrated that they will hew to restrictions such that they will be able to build and continue to build someplace where there is affordable housing, that the Department of City Planning and the Community Board has resolved that these applications, when entered into, will be a binding commitment. Last, what I would like to talk about is the references to apartment buildings being built in this area within a half-a-mile zone. That project, which is being referred to, is explicitly Atlantic Yards or Pacific Park. The community board was unable to participate in those negotiations, especially for green space, because it became a state project. As a city project, the Land Use Committee supported the work of M Crown, which is a subcommittee, and it is a community rezoning endeavor, simply because the people who belong to M Crown are not just community board members, but people and stakeholders have invested in themselves and the community over a long-term vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wedderburn.
The next speaker on this panel is Nicole Lamwell. I'm sorry, Nicole, if I mispronounced your name.
Time starts.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Nicole.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you very much for letting me speak. I live at 1022 Pacific Street, which is in close proximity to the proposed project. I've lived there for 20 years. And I'm also a land use committee member, voting member. So I urge you to please reject these proposals. And my reasons are, I believe that we need a holistic neighborhood plan for Atlantic Avenue, not a series of disconnected private developments, that we need to reassess what our neighborhood truly needs, given the changes caused by the already built or approved new developments. We need to cherish our existing neighbors, protect them from the possibility of losing their homes, becoming unable to afford their rent or being displaced. To my understanding, the average income has already increased over the last few years due to the new arrivals, which is what the affordable housing is based upon. I'm a CB8 Land Use Committee member. The actual community that we live in feels on the side of constraining construction. As a committee member, I think I should amplify my neighbors' voices. I also would like to state that that to my understanding, the community board rejected their applications in favor of a neighborhood-wide rezoning. And as I stated before, I've lived in the same apartment for 20 years. Since the Barclays Center was approved, the neighborhood has changed drastically. I used to be surrounded by lots of little businesses. There are only a few left. One of the last standing business, a carpentry shop on my block, might have to leave due to increasing property tax and blocked access to their shop caused by the construction vehicles and workers' parking needs caused by the ongoing and increasing developments. I'm not against change, but we need to be careful. These two rezoning applications won't give us nearly as much affordable housing as we could get with a serious neighborhood plan. We need to keep the existing neighbors' nature and our beloved neighborhood in mind. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Nicole.
Sure, the next speaker on this panel will be Kaya Kool.
Time starts.
Can you unmute? Sorry. Hi.
Hi, my name is Kaya Ku. I'm an urban planner. I'm the principal of a Brooklyn-based planning firm called You Are the City. We do community engagement and urban design. And as the two previous speakers, I'm here to ask you to consider rejecting this and the following application for 17-story market rate residential buildings, and instead support what Councilmember Hudson has asked for, a community-led comprehensive planning effort for this stretch of Atlantic Avenue that could generate much needed affordable housing. And as we've just seen with the Gowanus plan, at 35% of units being affordable there, it's really worth it to go through the effort and negotiate a comprehensive plan that can deliver so much more than the breadcrumbs that individual haggling over MIH options can offer here. And we can coordinate development with non-zoning actions, such as a plan for improvement to transportation, open space, schools, as well as strategies for family sustaining jobs, infrastructure, so many of the things that previous speakers have said. I want to focus on one thing. I really applaud the developers' support for a neighborhood plan. I also applaud the attempts to sort of look at streetscape improvements more comprehensively. I want to point out one thing that we don't get by this piecemeal moving forward, and that is really a true consideration of the impact and the ability to mitigate them and find strategies to mitigate them. These two proposals are part of the densest cluster of private rezonings, 8 in total, within a half-mile radius on Atlantic Avenue from Vanderbilt to, I believe it's Bedford or Franklin, in less than 3 years. And here I contradict the council member. This is more than 2,000 units of housing or 5,000 new residents. And no one has ever studied the comprehensive impact or the collective impact on the communities, the neighboring communities that have to support all of this additional development. And that is because environmental review is done on a piece-by-piece, in a piece-by-piece fashion where we cannot get a full look at it. Thank you.
Chair, the last speaker on this panel is Esteban Giron.
Time starts.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, we get you, Esteban.
Great. Thank you. My name is Esteban Giron. Good afternoon. I'm a rent stabilized tenant here in Crown Heights and a member of the Crown Heights Tenant Union, as well as a member of the Board of Directors of Tenants PAC. We will be submitting written testimony today, but I just wanted to address a couple of things that have come up so far. You're going to hear the developer and other supporters of this application speak about community benefits. And I think it's very important to be specific about what that means and what it doesn't mean, because you would think that it's a good thing. Who doesn't want community benefits? But the problem is that the actual community was never consulted about what we needed and what we would actually benefit from. The community benefits didn't come from any sort of engagement process. The formal council member told the developer that they wanted what they wanted there. And then without any notice to the wider community or the community board or the land use committee, an unelected self-appointed representative, along with a couple of members of the executive committee, hammered out the details. So when they say they're negotiating with the community, they mean 3 people who don't consult with any authoritative body or community group. With all due respect to Ms. Weatherburn, her testimony completely misrepresented the vote of the board. As Councilmember Hudson correctly stated, this application was disapproved with conditions, the main condition being a development of a neighborhood plan. It's not surprising then, when we say that we aren't being heard, this is what we mean. We're sitting here talking about rain swells and murals when I had to be late this morning to this hearing because of a housing court appearance in my own case. So the CHTU urges this subcommittee to reject the application. Tenants are deep in the heat of battle for our homes. We are barely hanging on. We know what this project will mean for us. Please believe us.
Thank you, Esteban.
Chair, we have one last speaker on this panel, actually, who have called in. So we have Kathy Iceland. Kathy, are you there? And can you hear us?
Time starts.
Kathy, can you hear us?
Sure, we are checking.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Kathy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I apologize. There's an optimum outage in the north part of Prospect Heights, oddly enough. My name is Kathy Islin. I thank you for this opportunity to speak. I, like many of the other speakers, are a member of the CDA Land Use Committee, a board member of North Prospect Heights Association, and a North Prospect Heights resident. I'm testifying because I am deeply concerned about this private ULURP application and request that it be rejected. In particular, as many of my colleagues and friends have noted already, I object strongly to the use of CB8 agreements as part of individual applications as a replacement for necessary neighborhood-wide planning, which would allow as a replacement for city planning and for a neighborhood-wide plan, which would allow our neighborhood and this large section of Brooklyn to secure the attention and proper review by city agencies that we deserve, and which will improve our city for current and future residents. City planning should not be relegated to for-profit developers negotiating deals with individuals in private exchanges for benefits that we're not sure for whom and by whom they were agreed upon. One only has to look at the skewed outcome of private CBA negotiations at the recently approved 840 Atlantic Avenue to recognize that the community was not well served by the outcome of these kinds of negotiations. This application, combined with that at 870, 888 Atlantic Avenue, will not yield nearly as much affordable housing, nor the other possible benefits we can achieve with serious neighborhood planning. Building a vital neighborhood requires a wide range of planning, including public input from as wide-ranging cross-section of residents as possible to discuss genuinely affordable housing, displacement and racial impact studies, consideration of public transit, streets, sidewalks, pedestrian crossings, wastewater, school seats, and least we forget open space deficits. Please reject this application in favor of a better outcome for our neighborhood and for Brooklyn. And one should think that the time it would take to do this is much more important than establishing these two buildings within the next 2 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Chair, that was the last speaker on this panel, and I don't have any more panels to announce, so I will just do a last call. So if there are any members of the public who wish to testify on the 1034, 1042 Atlantic Avenue proposal, please press the raise hand button now. And we will stand at ease for a few seconds just to check for any newly registered members of the public. Chair, I don't see any additional members of the public, so we can proceed to closing.
Council, I do see one hand raised. Can you just make sure there?
Will do. Let me double check with the. Oh, yes, you're correct, Chair. We have Ankur Dalal. Can we admit him to Ankur so we can have Ankur testify?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ankur. Go ahead.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm actually registered to speak for the next proposal, but I also wanted to just voice my support for this project. I am enthusiastic about the possibility of new affordable housing in the neighborhood. And as I'll testify further in the next application, I strongly believe that the best way to combat displacement is to just build more homes. We desperately need more housing in New York City. Over the last 10 years, our population, according to the census, has grown by more than 600,000. That's the size of some major cities in this country. And we just added that to our city in the last 10 years. But we don't build enough housing to house all of these new people. We built only about 200,000 homes in the last 10 years. And since the pandemic, things have gotten only worse because after the pandemic has begun to end, many more people want to come back to the city and rents are going through the roof. The only way to help mitigate this problem is to actually build more housing. And I know some of the speakers said it's worth waiting until we get a comprehensive plan passed. I have no objection to a comprehensive plan, but these things can take a very long time. The Gowanus comprehensive plan took almost 10 years to complete. We don't have 10 years to wait for homes. If you're somebody who's looking for a home or somebody whose rent has gone up 30 or 40% in the last year, we need new homes as soon as possible, and this project will deliver them. So I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anchor. Council, I think we have one more person.
Yes, we have Alan Rossner, Chair. Alan, are you there? Can we unmute Alan Rossner?
I'm sorry.
We can hear you now, Alan.
Oh, good. Thank you. Okay. Yes, I'm really scheduled to speak to the next for the next event, but the next building. But it's really the same issue for both of these buildings, in that there is no plan for open space and in development, and in fact, that's the problem with the M Crown. There really is nothing in M Crown that deals with creating open space. It's all about just how to use space that's already there, but there's no open space to be had. There's also, the M Crown didn't deal with the issue of secondary displacement. So now you have more development, rising incomes, and you're going to have more secondary displacement. There's nothing to take care, there's nothing, looking at that. And so maybe you'll have affordable housing on one hand, but you'll have people losing their apartments and their homes on the other hand. So it doesn't balance out very well, in my estimation. The other thing you have to remember, especially with anything about open space for people, is Atlantic Yards was supposed to be done already, and they only have private open space. So there's nothing to be had there. People are talking about the amount of people coming in. You haven't even factored in the numbers that are going to be coming from the Atlantic Yards development. So we do need some comprehensive planning for both the infrastructure, the open space, and even on the regards to overall housing and displacement. So those are some of my big concerns. I'm against this kind of piecemeal development. And as others have said, this needs to be addressed comprehensively. This is kind of giving away things that don't have to be given away, simply because there's a sense of desperation.
Time expired.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There, I see one more hand up, Elaine Weinstein. Elaine, can you hear us?
It was a mistake, sorry.
Oh, she already testified, Chair, so apologies. Thanks, Elaine. We'll lower your hand. So, Chair, I don't see any other hands up for people waiting to testify, so we can go ahead and close this hearing.
Thank you, Councilor. There being no other members of the public who wish to testify on LUs 20, 21, and 22 relating to the 1034-1042 Atlantic Avenue proposal, the public hearing is now closed and the items are laid over. I will now open the public hearing on LUs 23, 24, and 25 relating to the 870-888 Atlantic Avenue proposal in Councilmember Hudson's district in Brooklyn. This application seeks a zoning map amendment to rezone an existing M1-1 district to a C6-3A district and a related zoning text amendment to establish an MIH program area and a special permit to reduce residential off-street parking. For anyone wishing to testify on this item, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/land use. Once again, council.nyc.gov/land use. Council, please call the first panel for this item.
The panel for this item will be Richard Lavelle, Bayam Baton, Noah Bernstein, Joel Teitelbaum, and Nick Liveris.
Council, please administer the affirmation.
There are some of you who are sworn in already. So Richard Lobel, Fayan, and Nick, you have been sworn in. So for Noah Bernstein and Joel Teitelbaum, can you respond to my question when I call your name and raise your right hand? Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the subcommittee and in your answer to all council member questions? Joel Teitelbaum?
Yes, I do.
And Noah Bernstein?
I do.
Thank you. For the benefit of the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant team may begin. Panelists begin. Panelists, as you begin, I'll just ask you to please reinstate your name and your organization for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Chair Riley, council members, members of the zoning subcommittee. Good afternoon, Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC. I join the applicant team in representing Joel Teitelbaum on the 870 to 888 Atlantic Avenue rezoning. Can you please load the slide presentation? So this is a rezoning on 870 to 888 Atlantic Avenue. Next slide. The project area consists of 7 and a partial eighth lot, and the subject site is 20,000 square feet. Is a 20,000 square foot parcel located along Atlantic Avenue. The following are the proposed actions: a zoning map amendment to change the existing M11 to a C63A zoning district, again requesting R9A in bulk. The second action, of course, a zoning text amendment with regards to mandatory inclusionary housing to require 25 to 30% affordability for the project, depending on option 1 or 2. In actuality, after discussion again with the community boards and stakeholders, we are introducing option 1 and option 3, which can be discussed later in the presentation. Third, a text amendment to modify section 3566 to permit a wide 20-foot wide sidewalk along Atlantic Avenue. And fourth, a special permit pursuant to 74533 to reduce accessory parking. The proposed actions here would facilitate the development with a new, at the time, 17-story mixed residential, commercial, and community facility building with retail and approximately 228 dwelling units. Nick Liberis, the project architect, will be able to discuss the breakdown in square footages and layouts later in the presentation. Here we would be creating approximately 57 to 69 affordable units, depending on whether option 1 or 3 was selected. Again, the applicant here was choosing to provide greater affordability than is required in area-wide rezonings generally by the city. We note again, and we'll read the community board approval, so there's no questions about the nature of the approval. The community board did issue a determination that said that they wanted to allow for an area-wide rezoning. This is something which we mentioned and agree with. However, understanding that, the text was that if that is not possible for an area-wide rezoning, the committee recommends the following possible scenarios. As were detailed previously, these include mixed residential and commercial districts. So the idea here is, yes, there is an understanding that an area-wide rezoning is preferred and was preferred. But again, in the absence of that area-wide rezoning, you now have 7 years of increased population, not matched by an increase in residential units, and rents which now exceed 30 to 40% greater over that 10-year time span. So this is, as has been described, a dire situation, and one which would be addressed by the application which is before the council. Next slide. So I'm going to go over a brief retelling of the zoning basics with regards to the application, and then Nick Liberis will discuss the particularities of the building. Again, you can see from the circled area, this is along Atlantic Avenue in an area currently zoned M11. For the benefit of the council members, M11 is a terrible zoning district in certain respects in that it doesn't allow residential, but more importantly, even for manufacturing and commercial uses, it provides for a low floor area ratio of 1 and for a high parking requirement, which leads to a lack of development and really the open uses which you see before you, including underutilized and poorly utilized lots, warehouse buildings, auto repair, and such. Again, here you can see the area to the south of this map, the 2013 Crown Heights West rezoning, which rezoned 55 blocks or portions of blocks to residential contextual zoning. And to recap, these 6 blocks with M11 zoning were left out. It is a financial burden to provide the environmental and other diligence required to rezone these parcels in an area-wide rezoning. That is why individual developers have come in and they've spent the money. They haven't just spent the money on their own parcels. They've spent the money on greater than their own parcels to include other parcels in these proposed rezonings. So again, we note the area's preference for an area-wide rezoning. In the absence of that, you literally have hundreds of people who, as a matter of public record, are now being priced out and forced to move out of the district. And now you have an opportunity to provide some of these units for them. Next slide. So this is the zoning map. This is a very straightforward rezoning. The area in question, you can see the 7 to 8 lots that are within the dotted area would be rezoned to a C63A. This is an R9 equivalent at a floor area ratio of 8.5. We note that the prior rezonings within Community Board 8, which have been cited before the council, have included a 4.6 FAR on Pacific Street when the Community Board had requested 3 to 4 FAR, have included a 5.6 FAR on Pacific and Grand when the Community Board had requested 4 to 5 FAR. City planning has deemed in their professional experience that Atlantic Avenue here merits an R9A rezoning. Why is that? Next slide, please. Again, with regards to the area map, first, this is a different application in that we note that 840 Atlantic Avenue, immediately to the west of the rezoning area, has previously been rezoned to R9X with even greater density than is proposed here. That's on the same block. And that's something the council did within the last 6 to 8 months. We further note that the C63A as proposed here is something which is not unknown to the area. Again, higher density districts on this block. Across Atlantic Avenue, you have C63A or R9A equivalent districts. This is something which is appropriate here. City planning has presented to the Community Board and to the Commission itself with regards to the impact of a building of 15, 16 stories on Atlantic Avenue. The bulk is acceptable in terms of land use planning. You have an extra wide street in Atlantic Avenue. You have a multitude of transportation options. This is something which is merited for the area. And with the street improvements that are proposed, is something which will deliver a benefit to the area, not just in terms of housing, but in terms of commercial and other activity. Next slide. With that, I would just again touch on the proposed zoning change map and then allow Nick to complete his portion of the presentation. Again, you can see on the left the area in question, which is currently zone M11, adjacent to R6A and R6B districts, as well as an R9 district. And here we have a C63A district, as would be proposed, which would rezone this parcel and surrounding parcels to an R9A residential equivalent. With that, I would hand the presentation over to Nick, who can discuss the layouts as well as context of the area and why, from an architectural standpoint, the proposal is appropriate. Nick?
Thank you, Rich. Nick Laveris with Archimera. Next slide, please. So the site, again, is extremely proximal to the Pacific Park development coming up, and there's a natural barrier that city planning had originally contemplated as being at Vanderbilt Avenue, but when we, with city planning, looked at it more closely, it became apparent that the Washington Underhill area, right to our east, to the east of the block, was the more natural boundary for a step down for bulk. And this is what opened up the conversation initially about the bulk that Rich was mentioning. So again, same as 1042, this is on a very busy street. It's anticipated as being a commercial strip. Next slide, please. So again, this is the M Crown. I think despite the feelings pro or con against it, I think there's some things that that kind of make indisputable sense. In that Atlantic is a very broad and very active street, and it's something that elsewhere in the city would be developed as a high density mixed use area. So this is that M Crown vision. Next slide. The proximity to all of the transportation infrastructure is quite good on this site. It's as densely innervated as any other place in the city, just in terms of how much access it has to buses, to train stops, etc. Next slide, please. This is the subject building. We've also taken care with this building to kind of disaggregate the form so as to allow as much light to the street as we can. We've also suggested per our client to do both options 1 and 3 at a level that is higher than the framework that's in the zoning. So the building is 200 feet by 100 feet deep at the base, and then it has the regular setbacks at the front and at the rear that we could briefly touch on later. But the subject site is 20,000 square feet. The building would be about 210,000 square feet gross, including a single cellar. There would be some limited parking provided. The way that it's set up right now, there's 228 units proposed, and between 25 and 30% of that would be proposed to go to permanently affordable MIH units. Next slide, please. So this is a unique community board in that they're one of the, I think, 2 in the city that have been able to get these restrictive declarations done. So this was the same model that we assumed for this, and this was something that when my client had reached out to several community groups on, this was the space that that seemed to make the most sense, both in terms of its proximity to the more quiet Washington side of the block, and also in how it was able to kind of cleanly turn into a two floor type of offering. So what's offered right now is 4,200 square feet between the ground and the cellar floor of school use, and this is approximately 30% of the ground floor commercial, which has been proposed. Next slide, please. This is a slide showing the unit distribution and the front elevation throughout the building. You can see 17 stories. As it tapers up to the top, there's fewer and fewer units. Next slide, please. This is a look west down into the more dense downtown Brooklyn fabric. So you can see that there's still a CubeSmart to our immediate east. But what's been contemplated here is much like the other project, the same type of DOT improvements. You can see that there's a more densely planted median in the middle. We had been talking to DOT about these trees on Atlantic going back, well over a year. And there were issues potentially with LIRR that have since been ironed out. So again, we've been instrumental in making this thing move forward in this realm of public space improvements. Next slide, please. This is a front elevation. You might note the two objects that are kind of nestled in the portal forms. At one point, we were talking to this local gallery, and it had been suggested that we could have these types of like vitrine objects that would become incorporated into the facade that would display all manner and media of art. So right now it's just a placeholder, but again, we feel like this is something that could be a very playful and pleasant addition to this to the streetscape over here. Next slide. This is a more close-up elevation perspective, and you'll note again the disaggregated building form and how it's not as blocky as it could or would be were it's shorter. Next slide, please. So we went back and forth with the borough president's office, and something that was brought up also by the community board was that, when you have when you have these rezonings, there's often proximal conditions where you're on a street which is right next to the rezoning, and you're presented with some bulk, which is atypically oppressive and large. But this is a very common thing that's done when you're doing landmark work, where you're able to demonstrate that the contextual condition is such that you won't be able to perceive what something is at a certain distance, whether it's from the street or in this case from the backside of the block. So, there were several neighbors that had asked us about this, and we took them seriously, and we went back to the borough president with this, and this is something that they were pleased with. And what we've done is we've stepped the back such that the typical scale of development on the backside of the block would include view and like basically any presence of this larger scale structure on the north side of the block. Again, there's no issue with any kind of shading, because we are to the north of everything to the south, which is generally lower and smaller scale. And we think this is a good sensitive solution that solves a lot of problems. Obviously, on vacant lots, you won't have the building blocking your view. So if you have a vacant lot, or if you're seeing it from an oblique perspective, where you have something that's atypically low, you would still perceive some little bit of something on a little sliver at the top. But we've taken care to make sure that this works, and this is also part of why we're requesting this height, because once you nip and tuck front and back like this, you end up with a lot of difficulty with how to deploy the floor area. So next slide, please. This is a slide that shows the two AMI options that are being suggested here. The 40% AMI and the 60% AMI. You can see that it's between 57 and 69 units for the two options. Again, this is in excess of the framework that's in the zoning. Next slide. So this is a kind of a bird's eye view showing what those DOT improvement building blocks would look like on this site. So it's it's the same building blocks. Part of what we had suggested is that the developer be responsible for stuff that's within a few hundred feet of them. So that would be corner conditions. There's a precedent for this right now. DOT compels you, if you have a corner site, to fix handicap ramps and also crosswalks across the street from you, catty-cornered in both directions. Excuse me, not catty-cornered, but at the two perpendicular directions. So what we're proposing as part of the building blocks here would also be raised crosswalks, and the bump outs at the corner, which would go a long way towards reducing the chance of a lot of these recent accidents that we've been seeing in this area close to Prospect Park. One other thing, there've been repeated requests for open space and how the open space will be considered, if there was a neighborhood-wide rezoning. And something that's come up during these talks with DOT is that they would support closing down Underhill for the one block stretch between Atlantic and the Pacific, and this would create a open space that would otherwise not be possible, because I think there's a lot of understandable desire for this open space. It's always nice to have pocket parks. It's always nice to have a relief of the urban fabric with some open sky and some green, but it's often difficult because most of this stuff is privately owned, and in such a neighborhood over here, it's difficult to do eminent domain for smaller pieces. It's something where if you're in like let's say Williamsburg and you have these substantial pieces that the city has been working on for a long time, it's something that can happen. But this is kind of this was a very interesting gift that kind of fell into our laps. So it seems that this could happen, and thank you Joel, for helping us push this through. So anyway, So what we get over here, when you consider these two projects, 1042 and 880, over a 5-block stretch between Vanderbilt and Franklin, excluding the Armory block, you can basically take care of 40% of the stretch on the south side of the street. So this is something that we think is a major benefit here. And again, just to be clear, the green, the sustainable the big sustainable get over here would be the I can't seem to annotate here, but would be that the catchment area that's directly in front of the building, which in this case it's not a small catchment area. It's like another, probably let's say 70 by 200, like another 14,000 square feet, would be directed into the building's detention tank, which would upsize the detention tank, and you'd end up doing a lot to combine this very serious problem of a combined sewer overflow. So you can see here the typical constituent parts of this. If you could just go to the last slide, please. There's this. Can you go two slides back, please? So there's a premium placed on the safety of the sidewalk occupant and of people crossing the street just in general, with that raised crosswalk. And you can see that there are cast in place barriers here, which have been painted, which are planted at the top, and these are standard DOT elements. So each of these is of a piece with the DOT street design manual, and we've taken care to make sure that this is all stuff DOT can recognize and easily work through if and when the community board gets involved with this. Next slide, please. This is a reverse shot, just showing how it goes a long way towards making this sidewalk, which right now is very thin and very, very barren, into something which is much more pleasantly habitable. Next slide, please. And I think this is the last shot, this next slide, of right in front of the building, and you can see that the combination of that rain swale and of the street plaza and of the width and of the trees and all this stuff goes a long way towards making a much more pleasant experience for people coming here, because the worst thing we think, well, this is obviously not the worst thing, but something which would be horrible is if you had development, even with a neighborhood-wide rezoning, and you didn't include such elements, and you end up with something that, even though you have the potential for density, it just isn't attractive enough to compete with other neighborhoods in the area. So this is something where we think you could have a very very much more pleasant sidewalk experience, and we think that it would be a great model for the north side of the street and for other places up and down Atlantic. Next slide, please. And that might be the last slide. So with that, my presentation concludes. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Sure.
Just give me 1 second, sorry. Okay. Thank you, Nick. I have a few questions regarding the M-Crown framework. No, actually, I'm sorry, Nick. I actually don't have no questions. Those are from the last one. I apologize. Councilmember Hudson, do you have any questions for this applicant panel?
I do. Sorry, just one second.
All right, I would like to turn it over to Councilmember to answer questions.
Apologies. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Riley. A couple of questions. How long have you owned the property on Atlantic Avenue?
So I can talk about that. Yoel, you can always weigh in, but Yoel's currently in contract to purchase the property.
Okay.
Yeah.
When do we think that's going to be finalized?
I'm not sure if there's a closing that's been scheduled yet. I know that it's intended right now, but Yoel.
Yeah, there is a closing date on January 7th of 2023. That's in around 9 months from now.
So you will assume ownership of the property January of next year.
Correct. I mean, it might be even earlier, but that's the latest day that we can close on the property.
So who currently owns the property, and is the sale of the property contingent upon a rezoning?
No, the purchase is not contingent. I'm in contract hard on the property, so I have to close when the time comes.
Just as an aside, pursuant to the city charter, you actually don't have to own a property in order to rezone it. As a legal matter, as long as you're a tax-paying entity in the city of New York, you're able to rezone a property. So here, the application comports with the charter and with law. It's just that you all won't assume ownership until January.
Copy. So if this project is not approved, will you continue on with the purchase of the property?
Yes.
And what would you do with it afterwards, after the time of purchase, if the project isn't approved?
I'll continue to rent it to any future tenants. Right now the property is vacant pretty much, so if there's any future tenants, I'll continue to rent it out to any community space that's needed.
Okay. What sustainability and resiliency measures are incorporated into the building's design and construction, such as incorporating blue, green, white roof treatment, passive house, rain gardens, solar panels, and or wind turbines?
Nick, can you address that?
Sure.
Oh.
Yeah, we'd be seeking to do all of the above except for the wind turbines. Typically we've been using triple pane glazing almost exclusively going back to 2011, we have a few passive house projects. We'd be pushing geothermal. This is a really good site for geothermal over here. To anticipate your next question, it would be all electric.
Okay, cool. Thank you. How does this proposal address making Atlantic Avenue safer for pedestrians and cyclists?
I think the way that we've kind of drawn it up, even if let's say the worst case scenario, we weren't able to get something done with DOT, we would still be doing the rain swales. They would just be pushed back a bit, and I think there's always on such a street, you have to be very, very mindful of how you're trying to curate this sidewalk environment. So we would still have the bollards. In the event that we had street side dining, we would be providing the concrete barriers as well. So we're always thinking about it.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a plan in place to ensure local hiring and MWBE participation during construction, and specifically locally owned Black and Brown subcontractors?
Sure. So I'll answer just in the course of our other hearings, including with the Brooklyn Borough President. One of the conditions of that approval, which Yoel executed a letter of consent, was that he retained Brooklyn-based contractors and subcontractors, especially those designated local business enterprises, LBEs, consistent with Section 61081 of the city's admin code, and minority and women-owned business enterprises, MWBEs. The commitment there was to meet or exceed standards per local law 1. At that point, it was no less than 20% participation. My understanding from Yoel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that we wanted a minimum of 25%. And in addition to which, through the Brooklyn Borough President's office, they requested that he coordinate oversight of participation with an appropriate monitoring agency, and he agreed to that. So while no monitoring agency has been selected, we would be happy to submit to that.
Thank you. Good to know. And what about union jobs during construction?
Yeah, I don't think, and again, you'll feel free to answer, but I don't think that general contractor has been selected. And I know that while there is going to be union involvement, particularly in terms of 32BJ, that there's no specific designs right now as far as whether union contracting would be used by the GC.
Okay, thank you. The M-Crown framework calls for true mixed-use development with housing, jobs, and a diversity of community-enhancing uses such as light industrial, community facility, and arts space. Does your proposal meet these goals? What kind of mixed-use spaces are you proposing?
Nick, can you address a little bit the breakdown?
In the
mixed-use spaces, I mean, right now, we are currently contemplating the school use. And then we have another about 12,000 square feet that's currently contemplated as any use group 6 use group 6 type of use, whether that be office or retail, just like whatever the market bears. So it's a very wide street. We think that there's a good chance that some sort of retail or some sort of restaurant use goes in, and that's what's being currently contemplated.
Okay, thank you. Since 2019, there have been 5 private applications approved in the M-Crown area that will bring a total of nearly 1,000 projected units of housing. If approved as proposed, this project, as well as 1034 Atlantic Avenue, may bring over 500 further new units. And according to DCP's housing production database, over 6,000 new units of housing have already been built within a half mile of the M-Crown area since 2010. Do you believe that private developers can deliver the infrastructure and planning necessary to accommodate this growth?
So I'll start. I think the answer is yes. I mean, there's discussions with regards to DOT and street improvements, which were a large part of our discussions to date. I think probably to the extent that Noah Bernstein, who's here from AKRF, can just address the environmental issues for a moment. As part and parcel of every project, when we go through DCP, we go through environmental assessment and review. And I believe that EARD issued a negative declaration in that regard. So, particularly with regards to this project and any impacts, Noah, could you just briefly address with regards to review whether or not there were any unmitigatable impacts?
Hi, yes, Noah Bernstein, AKRF for the applicant. We prepared an EAS and went through the 19 technical areas that SEQA requires. Some of those areas screened out, and there were about 10 areas that required further analysis. However, after a further detailed analysis on those areas, no significant adverse impacts were identified. And City Planning and City Planning Commission issued a negative declaration in September.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Do you support a neighborhood-wide community plan for the area?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Okay, and go ahead. Did you want to say more?
Well, I wouldn't mind addressing this, council member.
Let me just, since I'm sure you are going to anticipate the next question I'm going to ask, let me just ask it and then you can answer it all together. And since you do support a neighborhood-wide community plan for the area, why should we move forward with approving these applications with no guarantee from the city on a plan or community investments? Thank you.
So, sure. So, we do a number of rezonings, as you're aware, and we've been in front of Community Board 8 as well as the Brooklyn Office of the Department of City Planning and the Commission in general over the last 6 to 7 years. The M-Crown resolutions, as found their origins in 2015, what were they really about? They were really about affordable housing and they were about job creation. And so when you talk about the prior rezonings that have been done in the area, 3 of those were handled by our office. And so you've got 1010 and 1050 Pacific, as well as the Pacific and Grand Avenue rezonings. And as far as 1010 and 1050 Pacific were concerned, the community board weighed in and in accordance with their resolutions wanted mixed use development at a scale of 3 to 4 FAR. And the applicant there delivered in terms of a 4.6 FAR and mixed-use district. With regards to Pacific and Grand, the community board wanted, again, mixed-use development at an FAR of 4 to 5. And again, the applicant there delivered. And at that point, the major difference, council member, was that a community benefits agreement was sought and was delivered as well, which was the subject of much discussion and work by the community and the applicant. So now you're on Atlantic Avenue. The underlying desires of the M Crown resolution and the community board have not changed in that regard, in that mixed use development is sought, and a certain amount of square footage is sought, types of buildings, etc. I think the challenge here and the difference here is that the city, in the terms of city planning, has said that the grades are different here, that when you go from a 70-foot wide street in terms of Pacific Street and a 70-foot wide street in terms of Grand, you now are stepped up to Atlantic Avenue, which is 120 feet wide. So when you ask, about a neighborhood-wide rezoning and what would be the benefit of proceeding here, I would say two things. The first is that the numbers don't lie. And the numbers basically indicate that in the last 10 years over this census tract, you've had over a 15% increase in population with a 7% or roughly over 7% increase in available housing, which has resulted in 30 to 40% increases in asking rents as well as in median rents for the area. That's a crisis. And whatever obviously there's very difficult and technical issues involved, but in general, if you're providing more of these units, and particularly more of these affordable units, more people will be able to use this housing, and more people in dire economic circumstances will be able to use this housing. Regardless of whether option 1 or option 3 is sought with regards to this proposal, the numbers with regards to rental and income are very stark. 10% of the units in option 1 or more than that in option 3 would be at 40% AMI, which would result in rental rates of $598 to $1,000 for a 3-bedroom, with most of them being between $756 and $900. So I think the issue here and why we think that there's a certain immediacy to a neighborhood to this application in the course of a neighborhood-wide rezoning is because there's families right now who are being priced out of the district and don't have anywhere to live. And so again, the numbers, the data, the facts are what they are. When people cite the Gowanus rezoning, Gowanus offers a good example. You've got a district there in an area where there were an abundant number of manufacturing uses. The Crown Heights West rezoning rezoned 55 blocks in this area to mixed-use to residential districts. That was the easy part. The hard part is to do the work that's required with regards to these M1 lots. It's not a perfect solution, but the applicant here is offering deeper and more meaningful affordability and other amenities that are not offered in many area-wide rezonings. And so it helps, and every little bit helps. And so that's why we think that it can be done, that it's important to do that now. And I also would reiterate that the city themselves, when asked about this, don't say that these applications are a disincentive to an area-wide rezoning. You're not letting anyone off the hook. They still have to address infrastructure. It's just a matter of whether or not you're able in the next 3 years to deliver and to allow some people who are in tough circumstances to be here, or whether or not you have to wait 8, 9, or 10 years. So that's I think, really the reason behind the application, and one of the reasons that Yoel feels strongly about going forward.
Thank you for that. Yoel, I think we don't know, much about your track record in terms of development. So do you have experience developing a building of this scale?
Sure, I'll answer that. First, I was born in Israel. My family moved down here when I was the age of 2. I've grew up in Brooklyn since the age of 2. I'm 37 now. I've seen a lot of growth in Brooklyn in the past years. I've gotten into real estate since 2009. I've built a lot of smaller size of developments in the past 10 years. The last 2-3 years, I've grown a lot. I own actually a big development site in Jersey City. We're building now 55 units. This is one of our next biggest projects that we're working on, and I feel very strongly and comfortable, if this gets approved, this building will be up in the next 3 years.
Thank you. And in all of your experience, have you been through a rezoning prior to this one?
No, this is my first one.
Okay. I think that is all from me.
Thank you, Councilmember Hudson.
Riley.
And I would be remiss if I did not give everyone a happy International Women's Day celebration to celebrate all our queens in City Council. Thank you for everything that you're doing in your district, Councilmember Hudson, and coming today and advocating for everyone in your district. Thank you. I would now invite my colleagues to ask any questions. If you have any questions for the applicant panel, please use the raise hand button on the participant panel. Council, are there any council member questions?
Chair, I don't see any council members with hands up at this time. And thank you for that shout out to all the women. That was nice. So no council members.
There being no further questions, the applicant panel is excused. Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on 870-888 Atlantic Avenue proposal?
Yes, Chair, we do have several members of the public who are here to testify. And although some of you are the same people that are testifying, I'm just going to give the same announcement for the benefit of those that haven't. So for the members of the public here to testify, please know that witnesses will generally be called in panels of 4. If you're a member of the public signed up to testify on the 870-888 Atlantic Avenue proposal, please stand by when you hear your name being called and prepare to speak when the chair says you may begin. Please also know that once all panelists in your group have completed their testimony, you will be removed from the meeting as a group, and the next group of speakers will be introduced. Once removed, participants may continue to view the live stream broadcast of this hearing on the council website. We will now hear from the first panel, which will be Sarah Lesueur, Sharon Weatherburn, Elaine Weinstein, and Peter Crashes. Sarah Lesueur will be the first speaker on the panel.
Thank you, Council. Members of the public will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please do not begin until the sergeant at arms has started the clock. And once again, we will only be given 2 minutes to speak, and you will be able to provide written testimony to the subcommittee. Sergeant, you may begin the clock. Council, who is the first panel to?
We have Sarah Lesueur, which I believe that we're still admitting the speakers. So let's just give everyone a couple minutes.
And once again, testimony can be emailed to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov up to 72 hours after the end of the hearing.
I believe Sarah is in the meeting already. So Sarah, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Sarah, you may begin.
Great, thank you everyone. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm not able to be on video at the moment, but I just wanted to bring up the fact that I'm again with the Crown Heights Tenant Union, and I wanted to bring up the fact that the proponents of this rezoning are constantly telling us to look at the benefit of the affordable units that they're going to offer, which is nice, but they're also telling us to ignore the impact that the unaffordable units that come along with them will have on our community. So the arcane rules of EIS statements allow developers to ignore impacts to the community because each project is considered in a vacuum, and they never reach the thresholds that would be necessary. But for our elected officials, it would be completely unacceptable for you, who should be accountable to the public, to ignore these impacts. Crown Heights Tenant Union members have learned through experience that even just the specter of more unaffordable housing or luxury housing causes the existing housing all around it to become more unaffordable, Our landlord saw the writing on the wall of Atlantic Yards and went on a decade-long rampage of tenant harassment through neglect or denying repairs, displacement, and then overcharge and deregulation, starting in Prospect Heights and moving eastward. And we fought back and won a legislative victory in HSTPA in 2019, but we still see rent-stabilized tenants under attack. Rent-stabilized units are being warehoused or Frankensteined in hopes of condo conversion. Unregulated tenants are facing impossible rent increases. And this is all because our landlords are expecting the displacement in the neighborhood to continue. They're expecting the land values to keep rising, and they're expecting our electeds to do absolutely nothing about it. So again, I urge the council to reject these applications in favor of a true community planning process. Thank you.
The next speaker on this panel will be Sharon Weatherburn.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Sharon Wedderburn. I am currently the Land Use Chair for Community Board 8. It is the Community Board's strong preference for the rezoning that is known as M-Crown. However, we have been unable to make progress with the Department of City Planning. Therefore, in the interim, we don't have the plan. We've had many private applications of this. This is one of many. Here's the thing. We absolutely support it because it hews to the M-Crown vision and the provision of deep affordability in housing. Our preference is that we have affordable housing. Our preference is that our community residents who are presently here will be able to find housing within this development because the displacement efforts are very real because of rising rents. And we'd like to keep members of the community who have been an active part of the community and made it what it is to now a desirable place to live, to be able to stay here. So if the applicants hews to the agreements that have been made, we will continue to support their endeavors.
The next speaker will be Peter Crashes.
Time starts now.
Hi, yeah, I'm once again the current president of the North Prospect Heights Association, and actually also a public member of the Community Board 8 Land Use Committee. Instead of actually just rereading the same statement that we made before, because we submitted that in writing, I'm just going to try to hit some of the points again, because I feel, first, I think that there's a kind of wordplay happening here. Community Board certainly supported a citywide rezoning, which is what the council member is now herself saying is what she supports. We think it's really important to say that the M-Crown itself, what's being described as M-Crown by Mr. Lobel, is, you would believe that it's only benefits. M-Crown had multiple elements to it. It had a zoning framework. It had and it was, most importantly, it was a neighborhood-wide plan. And it also was benefits which were setting priorities, and those priorities are part of a discussion that should happen as an ever increasing public process, which includes a broader participation. Many of the tenants who you've heard from today, in fact, I would say there are probably very limited tenants' voices inside of the M-Crown discussion. We need to broaden the discussion. Another example is actually the site, Mr. Liberis's citing of the Lowry Triangle, which is adjacent to the zoning area, potentially rezoned area as an open space. That was one of very few public realm improvements presented to the community board at the start of a process by the previous council member, a process that never took place. There has been no public discussion about how to have public realm improvements here. So we need a neighborhood-wide rezoning. The council member has said during her campaign that she wanted to center land use on she wanted to center land use on racial equity. This is an opportunity to do that. Let's keep this process moving in a way in which we can actually center the changes to a neighborhood, build a vital neighborhood centered on what the declared goals for building this neighborhood are set to be. Thank you.
The next speaker on this panel and the last one on this panel will be Elaine Weinstein.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon again. I'm not going to reiterate everything that I said previously regarding open space. I think if we all look at one another in the eye and we say to ourselves, is this a neighborhood that has enough open space? We know the answer is absolutely not. And I believe with all of these individual development projects, with people not holding each other accountable to provide open space to a community, to the families that live here, it's never going to happen. So my belief is that the only power our neighborhood has is that in cooperation with the city and all the city agencies to develop this holistic plan that respects the value of both diversity, deeply affordable housing, and open space. We actually have the ability to create a vital and a welcoming community in which to live. And if we reject these applications, we have that ability to move forward and make this plan vital and respectful of what the neighborhood wants and needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine. Chair, that was the last speaker on that panel, and I don't see any council members with hands up. So I'm going to call on the second panel, which will be William Thomas, Saskia Hagens, Rabbi Hecht, and Marissa Williams. So the first speaker on that panel will be William Thomas.
Time starts now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Hello, Chair Riley and members of the subcommittee. My name is Will Thomas, and I serve as the Executive Director of Open New York. I'm excited to testify today in support of the land use application for 870-888 Atlantic Avenue. Open New York is an independent grassroots pro-housing organization, and we support the project because allowing more homes in Prospect Heights would both help to alleviate New York's housing shortage and help to fight displacement in other neighborhoods. I believe that everyone knows that New York has a terrible housing shortage, but let me add some context to this conversation. Right now, New Yorkers are facing rent increases of 50, 60, 70% as rent discounts offered during the pandemic expire. Homelessness is at the highest rate since the Great Depression. There are over 14,000 children who sleep in city shelters each night. The 69 affordable homes this rezoning would provide are desperately needed. Furthermore, allowing more market rate homes in Prospect Heights, an objectively wealthy enclave of the city, will also help by preventing displacement in other neighborhoods. The census tract for the rezoning area has a median household income of over 6 figures. Prospect Heights is a desirable neighborhood, and although it would be likely many families' first choice, if they can't find a place to live here, they will move to a more affordable neighborhood. As displaced demand increases in those neighborhoods, the rent will increase and force current tenants to allocate ever larger shares of their income to stay in their homes and knock those who can't pay to the street. If neighborhoods like Prospect Heights don't build their fair share of housing, long-term residents of neighborhoods further in Brooklyn, like Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, will continue to be displaced. Approving this application is the first step in sparing families in less wealthy neighborhoods the pressure of displacement. This project has already been downsized since its initial submission. We hope to work in partnership with the local member, Councilmember Crystal Hudson, to fully realize her campaign platform of upzoning wealthy neighborhoods for mixed income housing by asking that the full size original proposal be equally considered. We must maximize the opportunity for mixed income housing on the site. We hope to work with you to approve the project. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on this panel will be Rabbi Hecht.
Time starts now.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Mendy Hecht, and I am in the neighborhood, the greater Prospect Heights, close to 20 years. Personally, as well as the organization that I'm involved in, has been in the greater neighborhood close to 80 years. I just want to take a moment to speak about Joel, who's the owner of this project, has showed and concern for the neighborhood and is willing to work and try to make a project that truly will benefit the neighborhood, and time in and time again, as well as an organization that is involved in the neighborhood. Our organization, although we are a Jewish organization, but those that are familiar with the Chabad and specifically in Prospect Heights, and also generally is one that takes as concern for all our neighbors. We specifically have 5 schools in the greater Prospect Heights, Brownstone, Brooklyn area, which preschools which help working families have their children being taken care of, and have both Jews and non-Jews who truly enjoy our program, as well as the Chabad has many different programs, between 80 educational and humanitarian programs that this facility will help the greater Prospect Heights, maybe for people with disabilities, maybe for the youth and teen lounges, maybe for after school programming. Therefore, I truly think that this project will be something that will enhance the neighborhood, lend itself to truly make it a great area. I know I was speaking a little bit with the developer. He has planned for a green area on the Underhill area, so I think there's something that could address many of the issues. I thank you. I appreciate your support, and shout out to our councilwoman, Crystal Hudson. Great job.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Saskia Higgins.
Time starts now.
Thank you. My name is Saskia Hagens, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Council, or PHNDC. We are concerned about housing displacement and market pressures on housing and affordable rents. Census data over the last 10 years shows that the increase in the population of Prospect Heights consistently surpasses the increase in the number of housing units. Meanwhile, the neighborhood population has become less diverse. First and foremost, PHNDC supports a neighborhood-wide rezoning as contemplated in CB8's M-Crown proposal. We believe that M-Crown is the best strategy to attain the stated desires of the Prospect Heights community for an equitable and logical development of areas historically zoned as low-density manufacturing districts, which would preserve diversity, avoid displacement, and encourage the creation of well-paying quality jobs for residents without a college degree. We share the community board's frustration with the lack of progress on the implementation of M-Crown by DCP. However, we also recognize that the applicant's proposal presents an opportunity to approve such private application in a manner that is consistent with M-Crown. As such, in lieu of the C6 3A district proposed by the applicant, PHNDC supports the rezoning of block 1122, lots 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, and 16 to a C6 2A district, with all lots mapped under MIH options 1 and 3. Additionally, our support is conditioned upon the applicant making a binding commitment with respect to the development site to restrict use of a minimum of 4,700 square feet of floor area to use groups 7B, 8B, 9A, 11, 16A, 16D, 17B, and 18A to offer the required affordable apartments under MIH option 3 and to limit building height to 15 stories. This is consistent with the second option outlined in CB8's letter to DCP dated November 24, 21, which accompanied the community board recommendation regarding the applicant's private application. Under the deep affordability MIH option 3, the applicant would create 42 permanently affordable apartments at an average of 40% of AMI.
Time expired.
Deeply affordable housing at the development site at 870 Atlantic will help promote social and economic diversity in Prospect Heights. We believe the applicant's proposed development, subject to the parameters set forth here, captures the sentiments behind and goals of M-Crown to address the need for more affordable housing and more living wage jobs in Prospect Heights. Thank you.
Thank you, Saskia. The next and last speaker on this panel is Marissa Williams.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, Chair Riley and members of the committee. My name is Marissa Williams, and I'm a representative of 32BJ SEIU. I am here again on behalf of the members to express our strong support of this project. The developer YNT has applied to build a new mixed-use story building with 4,200 square feet being allocated for a community school. We are pleased to announce that the developer has reached out to make an early and credible commitment to provide prevailing wage jobs to the future building service jobs at this site. We estimate that this rezoning will allow for the creation of new property service jobs and 57 to 69 affordable units. These jobs are typically filled by the local members of the community, and because of this commitment, will pay family-sustaining wages, which will help bring working families into the middle class. These apartments and community services are needed for working people in Brooklyn. This commitment to good prevailing wage jobs will give opportunity to upward mobility, security, and dignity for working class families. 32BJ supports responsible developers who invest in the communities where they build, and we know that this development will continue to uphold the industry standard and provide opportunities for working families to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Chair, there are no council members with questions for this panel, so I'm going to call on the next panel, which will be Esteban Giron, Kathy Iceland, Jack Robinson, Mimi Mitchell, and Kaja Cole. First speaker on this next panel is Esteban Giron.
Time starts now.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, so following up on the testimony from the previous application, I just want to once again point out that the language is very tricky here when they're saying approval, that the community board somehow approved this. What the community board approved was a recommendation to have these applications sent back, withdrawn, and then do a neighborhood-wide rezoning. So it is a bit of a tricky language the community board intended here. I just want to also point out that out of everybody that's spoken today, every single tenant, low income, Black and brown New Yorker, is obviously on the same side. So that should tell you something about how we feel this is going to affect us. It gets really frustrating to hear, basically everyone who's not in our situation tell us what's best for us, and we're pretty tired of it. So we really need you to not approve this application. Let us go back and actually have a process that is integrated with what the council member wants, what the former mayor said that he wanted. Like this is possible. So give us a chance to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on this panel is Kathy Iceland.
Time starts now.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak again. Starting my video, sorry. I don't want to reread my statement that I read for the first application. I just would like to say that I too believe that this application should be rejected, not that it's not a good faith effort, as is the other application, and that the applicants haven't tried to work with us, with the community board and with DOT and DCP. That's very different than working with a whole community and listening to what the community really needs, as opposed to what DCP or the developers believe the community needs. And I'd also like to say, particularly in response to the Open New York gentleman, that it's clear that you don't live in our neighborhood if you can say that Prospect Heights hasn't done its share of developing new housing. We certainly have, and I think the council member understands that, as do other members of the Land Use Committee and the Community Board. And I would really urge the council to reject this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. The next speaker on this panel is Jack Robinson.
Time starts now.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak again. It's Jack Robinson. I live at 1022 Pacific Street. I'm a member of the CB8 Land Use Committee, a new one, and it's been a really challenging couple of months with that. But we care, and that's why we're here. It was said that there was a conditional approval from CB8. The only consensus from CB8 was that we should have a neighborhood-wide plan. The CB8 vote was very close and made a contentious, which was made more contentious by the leadership's decision to eliminate the chat function in the meetings, leaving dissent and discussion between members silenced. The resolution was like, if not able to, but I think we're able to. Can one of the most powerful legislative bodies in the country, the City Council, help DCP to make this work? We're making some major changes to our neighborhood and the way that it's used, and that's important, and we need to do that, but we need to do it holistically. The actual community I live in leans on the side of constraining construction. As a member, I think I should amplify my neighbors' voices. And it seems like the EISs for the Atlantic Avenue projects are being watered down by separate applications and not being considered into a whole neighborhood plan. The shadows alone by the 1010 Pacific Street development, there's still snow on the ground because of the shadows. It's not allowing it to melt. We want development, planned development, and infrastructure in mind. Please do not favor this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. The next speaker on this panel is Mimi Mitchell.
Time starts now.
Okay, am I being heard?
Yes.
Nope. Oh, okay, good, great. I'm also going to be taking an extra minute from Mr. Esteban Giron's speaking because he only went a minute and he just yielded it to me. But anyways, hi, my name is Mimi Mitchell. I'm a longtime tenant. I've been here for over 17 years in Prospect Heights. I am a member of Crown Heights Tenant Union and also a volunteer advocate of Legal Hand Crown Heights. We serve Crown Heights and surrounding communities. Anyways, what I wanted to talk to you guys, I didn't want to repeat my prior testimony, but I do want to talk about the definition of affordability. It seems to be that phrase affordability, that word seems to be thrown around a little bit loosely. I've been hearing it being thrown around a little loosely. We need to understand what affordability means, and we also need to understand who needs the housing. I keep hearing you all say that, oh, you know, Prospect Heights needs more housing, it needs more housing. Who exactly are you referring to when you say that? Are you referring to the people who can afford the housing, the current housing, or are you referring to people who can afford the old housing, i.e. the old rents or the current rents? Because it isn't affordable currently right now, and it's just increasing daily. And it's developments like this that contribute to that mess. The gentleman from Open New York said that, you know, if Prospect Heights didn't continue to build more housing, that displacement would happen in other communities, in its surrounding communities. My question is, why are we the ones who have to bear the brunt of that? Why is Prospect Heights the one who has to continue, I should say, not even bear it, but to continue to have to bear that brunt? We've been bearing it. We've been bearing it for the last 7 years plus, and it's had disastrous effects. And it's without a comprehensive, community-based, community-led housing plan that brought us here in the first place. I'm taking my 1 minute. The lack of it is how we arrived here in the first place. So this is our opportunity not to repeat the mistakes of our past, but to actually create a beautiful blueprint that we can all use going forward so that we can all have our goals met and not be pushed out of our neighborhood. So with that, I and the people that support me strongly, strongly reject this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. And just for further clarifications, you cannot yield your time to another member, but I do not mind giving you additional time. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, for your testimony.
Chair, the last speaker on this panel is Kaja Kul.
Time starts now.
Hi again. Thank you for letting me speak again. And I just want to say how much I appreciate Councilmember Hudson's effort having stepped into this process at the last minute. And as you could hear from previous testimony, it's really messed up. Opinions of what the community board actually decided they want to recommend or not recommend are not even entirely clear. I want to point out one thing, and that is about the sense of urgency. We heard both developers support a neighborhood plan, so why don't we do that? I wholeheartedly believe it's not going to take us 7 years. We can do this quick. We're all committed to it, but we would come out with a better process. And just to give you an example of how the sense of urgency can also go in terribly wrong, this is exactly what happened with the neighboring property, 840 Atlantic. The same argument was used to rush and negotiate the so-called community benefits agreement, which, to my knowledge, is not something the community has actually access to. I don't really know what's in it. And as far as I know, the commercial tenant is litigating now harassment on that property. So who knows when these 27 affordable units that are being reserved for the community will actually be built. But we do know, or we can assume, that the 24 residents that live there now will be harassed out within the next couple of weeks and months. And we just heard this developer doesn't even own the property yet. How could he ever sign a restrictive declaration? I'm no legal expert, I don't know, but I really don't see why we need to rush this if this council member is really leading us into a more comprehensive process where everybody can have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaya. Chair, I see no council members with questions for this panel, so I'm going to go ahead and call the next panel. The next panel will be Ankur Dalal, Reginald Bauman, Reverend W. DeHarka Robinson, James Neville, and Tim Dingman. So Ankur Dalal will be the first panel as soon as he's admitted.
Time starts now.
Seems like he's not in the meeting yet. Ankur, are you there? He's in now.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Anchor.
Okay, thank you. I'm here to speak in favor of 870, 888 Atlantic. I think it's an excellent proposal. It's 228 new homes, including 69 affordable homes in a neighborhood, the census tract of which has median household incomes above 100,000. As the current zoning is industrial, not a single existing resident will be displaced by this rezoning. To the contrary, it is my belief, as I said before, that the only way to prevent displacement is to build new homes. If new homes aren't built here, the people who want to live here just won't disappear. They'll move further along the subway lines into Crown Heights, into Bed-Stuy, further into Brooklyn. New York City is growing quickly. We added 600,000 people in the last 10 years, and we need to build homes for these people. And if we make it illegal to build those homes, existing prices will only rise. Leaving things as is results in displacement. New affordable housing does not. The council member expressed concern that individual rezonings are being brought forward without a comprehensive rezoning for the community. While I am certainly happy to work with the community member and the community council member and the community board on a comprehensive plan, I don't think we should deny new housing until such a plan is approved. The recent Gowanus comprehensive rezoning took over 10 years to complete, and our housing crisis is profound. We can't afford to wait 10 years for more homes. And I know several people who have spoken before said we don't have to rush things, but I think that's an easy thing to say when you already have a home. There are people who are facing rent increases of 30 or 40% if they live in a free market rental. And there are people who want to move here today. For them, the uncertain prospect of a rezoning that may or may not happen over the next 2, 3, 4 years is not worth it. You have to build the homes for people who need them today. I also think that the MCRON framework is a fine start, but I don't know if it's sufficient for the neighborhood's current housing needs. I've been to many CB8 land use meetings, and my overwhelming impression is that a lot of people are using this desire for a comprehensive rezoning to kind of make excuses for other things that they don't like about changes to this neighborhood, including complaints about lights, about shadow. Really, the most important thing we need right now are homes. That's more important than anything else, and we need to build them as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Reginald Bauman.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone, Chairman, and to the distinguished panelists and elected officials. My name is Reginald Bowman. I'm the senior member of the Citywide Council of Presidents that represents the public housing in the entire city of New York. I'm also a former resident of Clinton Hill. I was born in 1952 and raised on Green Avenue. So I have somewhat of a serious familiarity with this entire area. And I'd like to add my voice of support for this project. I think it's important to understand that as we move forward in the 21st century and we look at the housing problem in our city, that one of the things was that I was surprised that at this age in my life, in the 22nd year of the 21st century, that we would still be debating how to construct urban living spaces in these areas. I think that the combination of partnering with the private sector and the public sector has been evident in some of this process. And I think it's important to take into consideration that during this time, especially after the pandemic, that it's important right now for us to have a sense of urgency to construct housing and livable units so that the people of the communities, not only in the one that we're discussing, but the ones in the immediate area that are impacted by this type of project will all have some place to live, and that these areas be collaborated on so that these types of facilities and homes can be constructed in a timely fashion. I think that there is no question that right now, if you look across the bay or look across the river,
Time
you see,
expired.
to close, you see high-rise buildings being built up for luxury people going up 100 stories high and what have you. We are living in an urban area where it's time to understand that this type of project is necessary, it's viable, and it needs to be constructed as soon as possible to meet the area needs for the people of this community. And I say this as a person who was born and raised in Clinton Hill and knew that it was back then, that area has always been integrated, and the people worked together to make sure that the environment and the community was built and constructed to meet the needs of the community. So if we work together, I think we need to support this project and others like it so that we can see affordable housing get built for the people of the community in the city who much need it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reginald. The next speaker on this panel is Reverend W. DeHarka Robinson.
Time starts now.
Thank you for allowing me back on. I had made an error and I was actually on the wrong panel. So I thank you for allowing me to come back and testify in this situation. I'm the founder of the Brooklyn Anti-Violence Coalition, an organization that deals with crime and violence in the community. And we work very, very much in the Prospect Heights community within the 77th Precinct Community Council and along with Community Board number 8. We see a tremendous need as the neighborhood changes to have affordable housing. So I really would like for it to be into support of this. Atlantic Avenue needs to be upgraded as we travel back and forth through that corridor daily. There's constant a blight of not having enough affordable housing for community members. We have homelessness running up and down the street. I think that at this time, at this juncture, when we're looking at in a post-pandemic time, that affordable housing for all should be constructed in this community. I don't see the correlation of building affordable housing and individuals being displaced. I see the correlation of people having affordable housing and having a place to live. There are so many families that have been displaced in certain communities, even in this community. So this project is needed where it's going to provide over 60 affordable units for the community residents. And so we are in support of this and we ask you to approve it. Thank you for the time. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Council members.
Thank you, Reverend. The next speaker on this panel is James Neville.
Time starts now.
James, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. All right. Oh, thank you, everyone. First, I want to thank the chair for that clarification of the yielding of time one to another. That was very appropriate. Also, the greatness of a people is how they treat the less fortunate. I believe that it should be maybe 50% affordable housing As you know, New York City is in a housing crisis. Thank you, Mr. Bowman, for your testimony. We can't afford to delay this construction of this new project. This project will deeply bring affordable apartments and upgrade the area. And that's what's needed the most. Partnering with the private sector has helped move forward projects along faster. So we just need to get this thing up on board. We need to get this thing working. We need to get this thing as soon as possible. And as I said, I think it should be at least 50% affordable units that should be developed. All this stuff I hear about 25%, even the construction process. Oh, well, we're gonna whatever the guys who's doing. Oh, we're gonna designate 25%. I think these guys should do at least 50%. Why is it? Oh, what is this 25%? Why is we being cut short? Why is the minorities are being cut? Why are you like 25% is the privilege? That's not a privilege. It should be 50% of minority construction workers. You know, not 20%, 25. 50% needs to be construction in that project doing this here. That's like handing me a fish bone when I want the whole fish. I want a sea bass. I don't want no fish bone. So I think we should consider doing more work with when the project begins. Get 50% of minority workers inside there. You know, I'm not asking for 75%, but let's at least get 50% of our minority contractors in there getting this project up and developing our community, our neighborhood, which I love Brooklyn so much, get it up and running in a positive manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. The last speaker on this panel is Tim Dingman.
Time starts now.
Hi, everyone. I'm just a tenant in the neighborhood. I live in Clinton Hill at the corner of Claremont and Fulton, which is right up the street from the proposed development site. My wife and I just had a kid. We currently rent a 1-bedroom. We're looking at 2 beds for the summer when our lease comes due. And I think we're going to get priced out, honestly, because there's just way less housing than we need, especially I think in the higher number of bedrooms. But overall, as some other panelists pointed out, just way underbuilt compared to the number of people moving into the neighborhood. You know, I volunteered for Councilmember Hudson's campaign. I'm very excited that she won. You know, I'm doing Rep My Block. I'm very involved in the community here. I'd love to be able to stay. But again, I'm just afraid that my wife and my child and I are going to get priced out come June. And plus Atlantic Avenue, you know, I have not taken my child there yet. It's not a great place to be for most of it. The street improvements looked excellent. I would really value that for the community and also as a pedestrian and also a bike rider in the neighborhood. The more space that we can make safe for both of those activities would really appreciate. And just want to emphasize, yeah, we've got a housing shortage. We need to do our part in our community. Other neighborhoods also need to do their part. I'm not saying that our area is the only one that needs to take on more units. I was very excited to see NoHo Soho get upzoned. It's a citywide effort, but we do need to do our part, and I'd like to see that happen. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tim. Chair, that was the last speaker on that panel, and I see no council members with questions, so I'm going to call the last panel for this item, which will be made up of Nicole Lamu.
Time starts now.
Nicole, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hello
again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello again. I'm also not going to reread what I said earlier, but I urge to please reject this proposal in favor of a community-wide rezoning idea. I understand that we all need housing, of course, and that the affordability is very, very, very important. And that's why I think we need to rethink these proposals, this proposal. I'm on Google Alert about our neighborhood, and all the apartments that I get alerted for are like $3,000 for a 2-bedroom, like prices that are outrageous. I'm lucky to be able to live in this neighborhood for 20 years because I'm in a rent stabilized situation, and I wish that situation upon everybody. And therefore, I urge that we rethink these proposals. And again, I'm not against development, and we need new buildings, but just not of this nature. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak again, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Nicole. Chair, I see no other speakers signed up to testify, but I'm going to go ahead and do a last call, just in case. If there are any members of the public who wish to testify on the 870-888 Atlantic Avenue proposal, please press the raise hand button now. The meeting will briefly stand at ease while we check for any newly registered members of the public. Looks like no one is raising their hand, Chair, so we can go ahead and close this hearing.
There being no other members of the public who wish to testify on LUs 23, 24, and 25 relating to the 870-888 Atlantic Avenue proposal, the public hearing is now closed and the items are laid over. That concludes today's business. I would like to thank the members of the public, my colleagues, subcommittee counsel, land use, and other council staff, and the Sergeant at Arms participating in today's hearing. This meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you, everyone.